Quorum call.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 123 members present, the House is now in session. So ordered, petitions, memorials, and other papers.
Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Baltimore and Hartford.
just a point of clarity. Are we no longer praying on the House floor?
We will be when we'll be in full session.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
But you can say your prayer silently to yourself.
Always do.
Okay,
And for you.
thank you. Will the committee chairs come forward along with the majority and minority leader? Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 members present, the House is still in session. Special order calendar. Vetoed HB 894. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 894, Education, Community Colleges, Collective Bargaining.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All my questions have been answered.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive?
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to ask you all to sustain the governor's veto of this very important bill. Just a little history. There's a lot of new faces in this chamber over the last number of years. And let's just talk about what this bill does. It basically expands collective bargaining to all community colleges in the state of Maryland, as the intent of the General Assembly. It allows for up to 4 bargaining units in each community college, outlines the process for conducting elections, and outlines what matters may be subject to collective bargaining. In the current process, county by county would come to this body when they agreed within themselves, between their county government, their community colleges, and the delegations, and they bring a local bill in, and they say, we want these bargaining rights. And we would give them those bargaining rights. And as has been done many, many times, someone who believes they know better than their own local jurisdictions comes in with a bill that says, hey, now we think everyone should do the same. And I often wonder when that happens, why that person from another jurisdiction feels they know what's best for our jurisdiction. Because I don't try to tell you what's best for yours. So unfortunately, someone thinks they know what's best for our jurisdictions and has come up with this idea that everyone should be one size fits all. So we've given up local control, which we always have valued here in this body, which every community college could ask for that and go through their delegation and get it if they chose. The ones that do not currently have collective bargaining have chosen not to have that. There's not the demand in their counties. Our local county boards of trustees oversee the policy and operations with funding provided by the state local governments and tuition. So it's a third local government. Well, it's supposed to be a third, but lately the state has not provided their full third, and that gets made up by local governments or tuition and fees. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you how important our community colleges are to each of our communities. To me, they're the lifeblood of economic development and getting people jobs and first-time folks getting into higher education. I always say, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And I'm going to just tell you from my county's perspective, Carroll County, we don't have a problem that we're trying to solve in our county. Carroll Community College is rated #1 community college in the state of Maryland. They're rated number 10 in the nation. We are very proud of that. We do not want this ability to do collective bargaining. This is not a priority. Our priority is focused on our students and based on economic development, what we need to bring jobs to education to our students for jobs. So I ask, why is this legislation needed now when there's already a mechanism in place for each county to determine its needs? Nothing in this legislation speaks to the quality or affordability of community college. And as I said before, the state has not kept up their bargain of 1/3 of the cost of community colleges, and that puts the pressure on our local counties, and it puts pressure on tuition for the people that can least afford to have it. Everyone that wants this bill can already do it. They can go to their counties and ask for that permission. I looked at the testimony last year, and I'm not on the committee of jurisdiction, but I looked at this testimony, and this bill has been in for a number of years. And again, the people that put the bill in, it doesn't even affect their counties already have this ability. So I'm not sure why they care about the rest of us who are doing very well. Maryland Association of Community Colleges opposed the bill. It fails to guarantee sufficient state funding to compensate our colleges for increased collective bargaining costs. The mere fact that the CADE formula has never been fully funded since its inception 29 years ago points to the state's inability to meet its 1/3 funding responsibility. Our community college formula has been rebased 8 times since 2008, equating to $140 million in funding, which should be in their base. Maryland Association of MACO opposed. Counties opposed a one-size-fits-all approach, which limits local decision-making. To move this collective bargaining outlined in the bill could create potentially unsustainable costs for counties. The bill will lead to increased tuition costs at a time when training and education opportunities are most needed. Please remember that. There's no other way to do this. It's either state money, county money, or tuition increases for our students. Current state laws include distinct collective bargaining processes for community colleges in several jurisdictions, the ones that chose to have it. Warwick Community College opposes the bill. With the budget cuts community colleges have absorbed, CABE-related reductions in the FY21 budget, they oppose this. Only 5 community colleges have in-house legal counsel, and almost all of them will need to have a contract for additional outside labor counsel. Regardless of institution size, labor law firms have provided estimates of $200,000 for their services for these community colleges so they can go into these negotiations. Additional human resources staff required to manage this process are projected to be more than $175,000 annually. The cost will vary depending on the number of bargaining units and the size of the institutions. These unbudgeted costs will be a burden on students through tuition and fee increases and reduced programs and services. Given the fact that 48% of community college enrollment is made up of students of color and over 79,000 students receive financial aid, this action will inequitably burden students of color and economically disadvantaged population by forcibly increasing the costs of their education and by depriving them of the programs and services of their community college. And I know someone's going to stand up and say, well, we'll address that in the budget. We say that every year, and every year that never really occurs. So this is Warwick Community College. Dorchester County, same thing. County Council, Dorchester County, opposed the legislation because it places current bargaining process that existed for years in our local communities and it replaces for the will of outside groups that aren't even in the county. And it will increase costs. College of Southern Maryland opposes this legislation. The fiscal reality of public higher education, especially community colleges, is dire. Even before the pandemic, community colleges were significantly underfunded, a situation which has not improved. While I understand the very human desire for job security, I do not understand why this bill comes at a time when community colleges are at their most fragile. In March, our colleges moved nearly every function to remote platform, retooled every student and system, and devised new protocols. They focused their work on serving students, many who are in crisis. This is College of Southern Maryland. Anne Arundel Community College opposes the bill. One simple reason, first sentence, cost. Where's this cost going to come from? It's an unfunded mandate. The cost proposal is cost prohibitive. As one of the largest community colleges in the state, Anne Arundel Community College previously estimated that the cost to us could be between $5 million and $16 million. Assuming no new funds from the state or county, these costs would require a tuition increase of 17 to 53%. That is neither realistic nor sustainable. In addition to the estimated increases in salaries and benefits, there are additional costs, including such as negotiating contracts, legal fees, and consulting fees. We do not currently have dedicated staff with expertise to address these issues, which could cost the college hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And they go on to say, look at it from another point of view. Why is this legislation needed now? That was the question I started with. It's a blanket requirement statewide when there is already a mechanism in place for each county to determine its own needs. To date, Anne Arundel County has not seen the need to make a change to allow unions. So why would the state mandate it without financial support? Where will the money come from? And even the Maryland Legislative Coalition, who said it was favorable, they said it does cost employers more. There's absolutely no argument about that. So my question is why? Why are we doing this to the counties that don't want it, to their boards of trustees that have not asked for it? And why would someone put in a bill to affect all of our counties when their county already can do this, has the ability to do it, and they want it? So please, this is about local control. It's about allowing us, the #1 community college in the state of Maryland, to continue to focus on our students and what our students need and making sure our tuition is reasonable so kids can go and adults can go and attend. So I ask you all to please look at this, do what's best for our students and our communities, and please sustain Governor Hogan's veto, very wise veto of this bill.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Hartford.
Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I stand today in support of the governor's veto, and the biggest reason why is because the impact this is going to have on exacerbating the student debt crisis that we have in our country and obviously in the state of Maryland. Obviously, with our community colleges, so many of the folks that attend community colleges in the state are low-income folks, middle-income folks, people trying to continue their education, people who may not have been able to go the traditional college route, and later in life decide, you know, I'm not making the income I want, so I'm going to pursue a college education at this point, and I'm going to start a community college. And also for folks that, you know, they graduate high school and don't know what they want to do. So they go to the community college, explore their options, and find their paths. I spoke with Hartford Community College, and I wanted to get some of the data from them to find out exactly how this is going to affect the student debt crisis in the country, starting with our most vulnerable students here in Maryland. So there are 4 different groups that are going to be able to collectively bargain under this. Adjunct faculty, which makes up the majority of our faculty at our community colleges, full-time faculty, part-time non-exempt, and full-time non-exempt. So we were looking at just if each of these groups only was able to collectively bargain a 5% increase, that would mean for Hartford Community College alone, an additional $2.5 million, which would then increase tuition for students at Hartford Community College by 19%. Let's take it a step further. After the full-time faculty and the full-time non-exempt, after these 2 groups collectively bargain, and then the part-time faculty, or the adjunct faculty and part-time non-exempt are able to negotiate the similar terms that the full-time did, that'll be an additional $3 million on top of that. So this will take the total burden for Hartford Community College alone to $5.5 million, which would that translates into a 40% increase on tuition to our most vulnerable students. Please listen to me when I say that. A 40% increase on tuition to our most vulnerable students, people trying to get a trade, people trying to improve their situation, people trying to move up the economic ladder here in the state of Maryland. And in the face of soul-crushing inflation, in the face of coming out of a pandemic, in the face of so many people trying to change careers or better themselves, and in the face of massive, frankly, a student debt crisis, for us to do this is just going to fan all these flames and do much more harm than good. So again, I urge the body to please, for all those reasons, sustain the governor's veto. Thank you.
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to ask this body to not override the governor's veto on this bill. I stood and spoke against this bill when it was offered in the last session, and I presented the reasons why we're so opposed to this out in Western Maryland. I represent 2 jurisdictions, Allegheny and Garrett County, that has community colleges. They're the smallest jurisdictions, the smallest community colleges in the state. I go back to when they created the Garrett County Community College, which is now called Garrett College. I used to work for a farmer next door to where I grew up on a farm, and we farmed the field, and there wasn't any college there. So I'm back clear before when the college was started. So I really understand and watch the development and know the people and know everything that's involved with that community college, and watched it grow over the years and seen the impact of that college on our community out there. So it's community, and community college is for the community. It's our community. And I think there should be some consideration given to the fact that we still have rural, small communities, and they ought to have some say in what happens to the way things are operated in those communities. I remember when they were discussing this, there was 3 county commissioners, and 2 of them were opposed to it, and one county commissioner had found the location for the community college, and the other 2 commissioners wouldn't agree. So when those 2 commissioners wouldn't agree, they had an opportunity to buy the land. So that one county commissioner took his own money and put a hold on that land until the next election, which was coming up shortly. And the commissioners changed, and then they purchased the land to start the community college. The board of trustees at that college opposed this. The faculty and the president of the college opposed this extremely. And as I mentioned to you before when we were talking on this bill, Garrett County did something that was really unique. Garrett County passed maybe one of the first bills in the country, and in this General Assembly gave the county, we're a county commissioner form of government, and they gave the county commissioners the authority to increase the accommodation tax in Garrett County 2% to provide money to set up a fund to grant tuition-free admission to every student that graduated from the high schools in Garrett County. We only have, 3,000 students in Garrett County, almost 4,000, less than 4,000 students in Garrett County. But our county is providing free tuition to any student that graduates from our 2 high schools at that college. And so, the community supports the college. We all support the college. We're doing everything that we can do to get our students to go there. And it's been a tremendous impact, and it's provided opportunity for a county that is one of the lowest income counties, average income counties in the state. And so going back to its very foundation, when that guy Dick Paul came forward as part of the community and helped start this college, and we have a college now that's growing and expanding, and we're grateful to this body for helping provide some funding at that college for a performing arts center. They're now struggling to figure out how they're going to, under this pandemic situation and the funding area, to even open and get that performing arts center up and functioning. So in Garrett County and Allegheny County, those 2 small community colleges, and I want to press upon it, they're community colleges, and in addition to providing classes and education for students, it is a big part of the community in providing continuing education. I even went there at one point and took heating and air conditioning class, and we encourage all the students, and we try to set up the curriculum there so that they can get electrical training, carpentry training, and even at one point they had a class there to train coal miners how to, proper safety techniques and how to mine. So back to the thing, community. I'm going to appeal to this body to recognize that these are community colleges. You and your community, and you that have community colleges where you already have collective bargaining, you've already done it. So, why? You got what you want. You got it the way you want. You made the decision. We didn't have any impact on you making that decision. Why do you have to force this on us? And so I want to appeal to you to please leave this alone and let us continue to operate the way we have been. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County and the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I'm here to urge you to vote in favor of overriding the governor's veto. And I stand before you once again to explain what collective bargaining is and what it isn't. There have been some jumps, and that's fine. I understand that there's emotion involved with one protecting local control as well as the quality and the professionalism that I know that my colleagues see in their community colleges and their local jurisdictions. But this bill is enabling. It's not a mandate. By implementing and by passing this bill, by overriding the veto, it does not mean that every community college has to go and collectively bargain or start a process of collectively bargaining with their individual schools or with their management. It creates and establishes and enables the process in which to do so. And what I find myself continuously saying one, being in this position to talk about collective bargaining bills and employee rights, is that this is already a right that's afforded to the private sector. This is already protected in law. We're not doing anything that we don't already accept as a right that the private sector has to form a union or collectively bargain and explain what it is as a worker, what it is as an employee, that they believe their working environment should be. There's been talked about cost, and I'll address that. But what's been left out is the fact that this conversation isn't just about money. It's not just about salary. It's about working conditions. It's about, do I have a voice in my workplace when I see something wrong, when my employees and my colleagues see something wrong? Do I have a right and do I have the ability to address those changes or address something and make a change and not fear repercussion or know that I'm protected, to voice my opinion of what I'm experiencing as an employee? That's also what this bill is about. It's about fairness and transparency and a place at the table. At the schools that currently have the ability to collectively bargain already have the right and already have this voice at the table and a place to sit, but the other colleges do not. And I will admit that any of the community colleges that my colleagues have talked about that are nationally recognized, that have great working environments, I don't imagine that they would then also go to start collectively bargaining because they feel that their voice is being heard. But for those schools that don't have the opportunity or have employees that feel that they have not had a role to play in their workplace or making it better, this provides them an opportunity and a path to do so without going through multiple steps of going to your local council or your local government and asking them permission to then come to us for us to give them permission to then collectively bargain. This provides the opportunity to do so if they choose to do it. It's all about choice. I want to mention too that there's pieces in this bill that also address some of the concerns, especially when it comes to cost. This doesn't go into effect for the larger jurisdictions until 2022. It doesn't go into effect for the smaller colleges until 2023. And because the Baltimore City Community College is associated so closely with the state, it also addresses extra costs that are associated with Baltimore City Community College. And there's one thing that I do want to mention that was brought up too as well. The pandemic that we've been going through, that we lived through a different session last year and that we have certain things in place now, they referenced how community colleges had to address, and they did it willingly, to meet the needs of their students and meet the needs of the safety of their staff and their faculty. For schools that didn't collectively bargain, it wasn't a conversation as much as it was what they were being told to do in order to meet the needs and provide the education they meant to do. And that's okay, except for the fact that if somebody didn't like it, there was no recourse and there would be no process in which that they could file grievance if what they were being asked to do they didn't feel was safe or wasn't agreed to. If this was a situation where a pandemic had hit and there was collective bargaining, there would be a discussion between management and between folks at the table and the folks that were actually working with students to discuss what their employee and what their workplace would look like and what they believed to be safe and what they believed to not be safe. It's about opening up the discussion, which I know we all do here and I know we all agree with. I do not believe that this is going to raise costs as much as folks believe it do. I think the example that we have in front of us is the fact that Montgomery County Community College has had collective bargaining for years, and they don't have the highest tuition rate in the entire state, even though they're one of the most expensive counties in the entire state. I think that's a great example of how this is a concern where you're worried about, one, tuition and cost, but there's an example where that doesn't apply. I ask again for the body to vote in favor of the override of the governor's veto. And I thank you for the time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there any further debate?
Madam Speaker.
Yes. The gentleman from Caroline.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have a couple questions for the floor leader, if I may.
Sure.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Did any employees, like you mentioned that the reason why we're bringing this bill forward is because we want to give the employees a voice. Have any employees from Warwick, Chesapeake College, Cecil, Allegheny, Garrett, St. Mary's, Hartford, did any employees come to your office or come to you or come to any of the other committee members or anyone in this body saying that they desperately need this bill to be passed? Or is there an overwhelming need that was expressed either to your office or anyone in this body from the employees of any of these community colleges that I mentioned?
Delegate, I have a stack of some folks that are professors, former professors from multiple jurisdictions. I can't state the schools that you had mentioned without going through them specifically, but I do know that we've had folks that are current adjuncts, former adjuncts, that did express the feeling of not having a opportunity or feel that they had a process for grievance that they felt was standard, that they could then trust to file grievance or ask for assistance without some sort of repercussion. Yes.
So who was the primary stakeholder that desperately wanted this bill?
I'd say the adjuncts, the working families of Maryland, folks that were looking for fair wages and fair practices in their schools.
Okay. I do recall the labor unions also wanted this bill to be put forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think they were the primary stakeholder, at least if I can recall the testimony in committee, that they were the primary stakeholder. They were the most vocal in ensuring that this bill was passed, I believe. And I can speak, at least my office and my colleagues who represent District 36, we have 2 community colleges in our district, and we're not aware of any employees who had come to us, over the course of the last 8 years asking for this bill. And I don't know that in District 37 that Warwick has as well. And I can't speak certainly for Western Maryland or Southern Maryland, but I would presume that none of those offices, anyone who represents those districts, that anyone had asked for this as far as the employees. And at least with my experience over the last 8 years, I believe it's the labor unions who truly want this bill to be passed. And I can understand why. If we follow the money, the more members that they have, the more successful that they're going to be. And again, what's concerning to me, at least back home in the 4 counties that I represent, I would give more, certainly more energy toward the folks who are going to be impacted and the stakeholders back home than I would, leadership in these labor unions. So, thank you.
Thank you for the comments, and I just, want to address the fact that there are multiple stakeholders that have participated in this process. You've mentioned the unions. We've mentioned folks that are former employees, former adjuncts, current faculty members. We also have county executives from multiple counties that submitted their support, who then also have a stake in terms of the local community colleges. I will not presume to say, your district best, delegate, that there are folks from your side of town or your counties that have come out or wanted to do this. I might say that if we're presuming, they probably may not be coming out because they're a fear of repercussion, that they don't have a process in which to protect themselves if they were to come out to try and support collective bargaining. I would also point out that in terms of working families for Maryland and folks that just want a fair wage, those are also these stakeholders. These folks that have been consistently working 3 adjunct jobs to do the same work that a full-time faculty person is doing, but then not making even a quarter of the wage. Collectively, yes, but not individually from doing the same work. I think those are also the stakeholders. But I appreciate the comment, and I would say that in terms of if the schools, as I mentioned before, from Western Maryland, the Eastern Shore, are so content with the operations of the school, as you mentioned and as Western Maryland has mentioned, I don't presume that they will attempt to try and collectively bargain. And that is honestly their right to choose to do so or not, and this bill does not force them to do so either. Thank you.
Which one came after? The gentleman from Kent.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To that end, I appreciate what the discussion we've had here, but one of the problems we have is no one over my area is asking for this bill. It's out there. If you want it, you can get it. We don't need it. We don't have those problems. We do not have the tax bases that you all maybe are experiencing where this bill is sufficient. I would encourage us to override this, to sustain this veto. This is just not something we're asking for. To blatantly say I'm going to have a one-size-fits-all because a certain group wants it, Again, we don't have these problems. We're not asking for it. We really don't want it. We would appreciate it if you would just keep it where it is and let us govern ourselves later. Thank you.
Recognizing the minority leader, minority whip.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I heard the floor leader talk about stakeholders. There is one, and the very most important stakeholder is the student. The person who's going to the community colleges to get an education, to get retrained in this new economy during the most difficult of circumstances. That stakeholder is also the same student that's in high school looking for dual enrollment, looking for new ways to develop their skills so they can get their first start in the private sector. And so every moment that a board of trustees, every moment that an executive team is spending working on collective bargaining, hiring a member to represent the community college, the time spent to retain counsel, the money spent to do both of those things in anticipation of collective bargaining is a dollar not spent helping children when it matters most. Madam Speaker, I was on the House floor a number of years ago when the floor leader stood next to me. I was in the Montgomery County delegation. And I know that this bill's been before the Assembly a number of years. And it's just not been the right time. Maybe it passes the House, it doesn't pass the Senate. But if it wasn't the right time 2 or 3 years ago, now's not the right time now. And I believe that the governor has the right posture on this particular bill because he's saying in his veto that notwithstanding the interest of collective bargaining and the interest of the labor unions, when we're not getting the testimony that really speaks to why a bill like this would come before the General Assembly, that now is not the right time to act arbitrarily and for the benefit of people that aren't the most important stakeholders, which are those students. Madam Speaker, I stand in support of the governor's veto.
Is there any further debate? Are you responding?
Just in response to
Floor leader.
In response, the students have been the concern when we talk about community college, when we talk about higher ed, and when we talk about K through 12 education in every aspect of this debate and discussion. When we talk about teachers in general, whether it's higher ed or whether it's K through 12, we're talking about the environment in which they learn. And the teachers and the standards in which we hold them to teach our kids and to teach college students and to teach adults that are looking to enter a new workforce or learn a new skill. They're inherent in all of the discussions, but what's missing from this particular discussion is the fact that while they are attending a university, the adjuncts and the faculty are the ones that have to work in that environment. They love their students. I haven't met one adjunct or one faculty member that doesn't love the students they work for and love the work they do at a community college level or even a higher ed level. But this is about community college, and this is about making sure that the environment they work in provides them the opportunity to give the best type of education that we already know our community colleges can provide to them by giving them a voice and ensuring that they get a fair wage and they can discuss that with management and what their environment looks like and that working families are taken care of. And we're doing that here at the floor. And again, not mandating anything. It is all about control locally. The only thing that this is doing at a state level is allowing them to decide locally what is right for their school. The legislature isn't mandating or requiring. We are providing an opportunity that already exists. The process to collectively bargain already exists. We are not creating that. We are making sure that if a school locally decides for themselves that they would like a place at the table, that they can do so. Every time that we stand here and do this, over and over and over again, we come back here and enable the ability for our workers to continue to have a place at the table and speak and talk, find out what they can do and what they can't do, and not fear repercussion. That's what this bill is about. But we have to have this debate every single time. We're not mandating anything. We allow for the right that every worker has to speak with their management and to tell them that something's wrong and we can fix it. That's what this does. We're not mandating or dictating anything. The process is there. We're allowing them to do it. And they will decide locally how it's going to be done after we override this veto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, the stakeholder in this bill is a student. It's about our commitment to equity and inclusion. It is imperative that we empower marginalized members through innovative and intentional equity and inclusion initiative. This fosters, as an educator myself, I can tell the research shows that it fosters learning communities that respect the inherent worth of all students, faculty, and staff based on values of justice, inclusion, and equity. If enacted, this legislation will allow for all faculty members is options. I was proud to carry this bill for our county, Baltimore County, and they will have an option. And the fight for faculty to enter into collective bargaining, these adjunct faculty, I was myself adjunct faculty before. It has been going on for quite some time. And this is the right time to enact this bill. And it preserves healthy and human working condition. And we cannot forget that they are a family men as well. These adjunct faculty are family men as well, and they have children. A strong collective voice is the only way to protect these bedrocks of high quality post-secondary education. If we cannot keep them at our institution, we can think about the quality education. Yes, the stakeholder in this bill are students. Therefore, we need to enact this bill, and I will be voting green to override this veto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further debate? Hearing none, the question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
To explain my vote,
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I'm voting no here because I hear what people are saying, and the good gentleman made a good point that the Baltimore Council, I guess, passed it, but that's what this is about. It's about local control, and the locals should be able to have control as to whether to do this or not. So that's why I'm casting a no vote, so we can continue to have local control. Thank you.
Any further debate? Any comments? Clerk will call the roll. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Oh, sorry. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 894. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Special order calendar veto House Bill 904. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 904, state personnel, collective bargaining, exclusive representative, access to new employees.
Recognizing Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions have been answered.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? Green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 904. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Special order calendar veto House Bill 278. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 278, Economic Development, Job Creation, Tax Credit, Qualified Position, and Revitalization Area.
Recognizing the Majority Leader.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. My questions have been answered.
Recognizing the Minority.
You can make me the majority leader if you'd like, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise today to encourage you to really consider the impact of this particular bill. The sponsor of this bill is someone who I consider to be a wonderful delegate and a friend, and is someone who works very hard on our committee on these tax credit issues. And I know that the bill is meant in a well-intentioned fashion. But I hope that you consider, I have to echo to a certain extent the comments or the theme of the comments of our colleague from Carroll County. And I can sum it up, and you hear it again and again from us, from some of us who do not live in the I-95 corridor. One size does not fit all. I wish it did sometimes. I wish that where I live, I wish where the Eastern Shore, I wish that certain other jurisdictions that don't have some of the, frankly, governmental advantages, some of the geographic transportation advantages that those of you who chose to live in the I-95 corridor, where I lived for many years, we don't have some of those advantages. What this bill does, and the reason why it has been vetoed, is it changes the effectiveness, it changes the ability to qualify for the job creation tax credit. Used to be, current law, as we woke up this morning, if the job paid 120% of the state minimum wage, it could be qualified through the applicable agencies to receive these credits. I got to be honest with you. Montgomery County really probably doesn't need the job creation tax credit in order to attract new jobs. Doesn't need it. Montgomery County has a lot of advantages. You've earned a lot of those advantages. You should be proud of them. You probably don't need this credit. Howard County, Anne Arundel County probably really don't need the job creation tax credit in order to attract new jobs and grow. You've earned those advantages. Be proud of them. Be proud of your growing economy. Be proud of your ability to be in the tech sector, a governmental center that enables you to grow. But there are lots of other places that need this. And what this bill does is it changes the formula for qualification for this particular tax credit and says now you have to do 150% of the state minimum wage in order to even qualify for the government to offer you a tax credit for a business to come, business to create new jobs. It also says that you have to offer things like retirement benefits. You have to offer collective bargaining opportunities. You basically have to be a great job or a really good job in order for the state to offer you these things. And what I would suggest to you that where I live and where a lot of people in this room live, parts of Harford County, the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, Western Maryland, parts of Baltimore City, we need these credits. And our definition for the folks who live there of what's a good job and your definition may be different. One of the most redeeming features about living in Western Maryland is I don't have to pay $600,000 for an average middle-class home. Sometimes I drive through some of the neighborhoods in the I-95 corridor, and I'm like, hey, this is a fine neighborhood. It looks nice. How much does that house cost? $750,000. Well, I understand right there why it's so incumbent upon everyone who lives in that community to have to make six figures and up in order to afford to live. You don't have to do that if you live in Allegheny County, or if you live in Dorchester County, or Wicomico County, or Washington County. Our housing costs are different, and as a result, our jobs are different, and our competitors are different. We're not trying, we're trying, but we're not very successful in attracting Northrop Grumman to come and bring 500 engineering jobs at $200,000 a year, and it's Montgomery County competing against Fairfax County of which side of the river they're going to live on. A lot of us are competing with Pennsylvania, or yes, dare I say it, West Virginia. It's a real state. It's a real place, ladies and gentlemen. They exist. And we compete with them for things like warehousing and distribution jobs. My colleagues from Washington County will tell you that for better or for worse, the largest thing coming to Washington County, if you've ever been there, it lays on the I-81 corridor. You can drive from Pennsylvania to Maryland to West Virginia in about 10 minutes. There are three cities that lie right: Greencastle, Pennsylvania, Hagerstown, Maryland, Martinsburg, West Virginia. They're all within a few minutes of each other. And they compete every year for warehousing and distribution jobs. Now, if I lived in a wealthier area, I would say, well, why do I need a warehousing and distribution job? It only pays $35,000, $40,000 a year. You couldn't even afford a house. But we need to be able to compete for those jobs with our competitors. One size does not fit all. And if you take a look at what Governor Hogan has done and what he has said on this bill, is that by enacting this, you're just taking one more thing away from the folks who need tax credits. We have lots of debates about tax credits. I'm sure we'll have more this year of who needs them, why we have them. And what I can tell you is the parts of this state that want to be a part of this state, the parts of this state that want to be your neighbors and your friends and work with you and be proud of that, we need these things. I wish we didn't, but we need these tax credits. We need these opportunities. And what this bill is going to do, unfortunately, and I know it's not the sponsor's intent at all, but I think unfortunately what it's going to do is it's going to result in places like Allegheny County, where I live. It's going to result in lots of other places in this state. Keep falling behind. We are so sick of falling behind. So sick. And we're going to keep falling behind because of the things that we do here unintentionally prevent us from pulling ourselves up. I ask you to think about that and consider sustaining the governor's veto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I ask that you vote to override this governor's veto. This legislation, what it does is it makes sure that the jobs that we create with this tax credit are jobs that you can actually go home and pay your rent, pay your bills, raise your family with. And it has been the will of this body. We've been trying to make progress over the years to do just this, to make higher paying jobs across the state of Maryland, to ensure that individuals can collectively bargain, that they have access to paid leave, and that if they lose their employment, that they're eligible for unemployment benefits. And so I think that we've heard these points argued on other bills as well already today and in earlier sessions, but this is very important for us. We as a body play a role in creating these jobs through this tax credit. So what are these jobs going to look like? Are they going to allow you to go home and pay your rent on time? Or are you going to have a second and third job in order to pay your bills? So thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask that we override our governor's veto.
Any further debate? The question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? A green vote overrides the governor's veto. 85 votes are needed. A red vote sustains the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 278 has been sustained. Overwritten, excuse me, overwritten. Message to the Senate, the clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 278. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Special order calendar veto House Bill 719. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 719, commercial tenants, personal liability clauses, enforceability.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be brief. Could the floor leader please rise for a question?
Certainly.
Good morning. So I'm a landlord. I imagine there are a number of members here that might be landlords. What is the basis for passing a bill that gets between a contract rate between me and a tenant? What's the basis for that? And there are other examples where the state's passed laws that get in between my private right to contract with another entity.
Sure. The thing that got in the way was the pandemic and the governor's emergency orders, which basically forced a lot of small businesses, restaurants, and bars to shut down, as we all recall. And so there was a question. A lot of these small business owners, I would say most of them, signed in their lease a clause that said they're personally liable, meaning their house would be on the line for any past due rents. So when the governor shut those businesses down, who's left holding the bag? We did something which I thought was a very sensible compromise, and we said, for 180 days after the governor's order expires, we are going to pause not halt, but we're going to pause that process of letting these commercial landlords seize people's personal assets. So all the bill does, and I think the governor got this one wrong, and my judiciary colleagues got it right, 18-1. In the Senate, it was 45-1. So what the bill does is pauses for 180 days the process of letting commercial landlords seize people's personal assets. So at this point, most of that 180 days is gone. The governor expired that order July 1. So I'm not trying to call him Ebenezer Scrooge here, but basically, here's the question before you. Are we going to allow people to stay in their homes for the next 2 weeks between now and Christmas and New Year?
So what about the landlord? I mean, they have mortgages, they have responsibilities, and this bill,
They
you're
can
actually
wait till
protected.
after the holidays.
Let me finish. So, you know, you're not just talking about small restaurants under this bill. You could be talking about any tenant. I'm not going to list any names on the House floor, but think about large pharmaceutical retailers, think about grocery stores, think about large businesses that do have contract rights that would be affected here. I'm a small business owner. I mean, I have tenants. You know, is my responsibility to the bank any different than that of a tenant who's agreed willingly to enter into a contract with those obligations and responsibilities, which, by the way, are not necessarily enforceable unless I would think a landlord would say there's no other way forward. I would think you would negotiate these sort of things, but if you take it off the table, how in the world do you have a good equilibrium between my responsibilities to a bank, for example, and the tenant's responsibilities to me?
I got to say it again. Maybe I wasn't clear the first time. House Bill 719, the bill that the governor vetoed, all it does is say the landlord can't take the small business owner's house until after Christmas. They have to wait until after Christmas, essentially.
All right. Madam Speaker and Floor Leader, thank you.
If
Well,
you
I
insist
don't
that they do it now, you vote to sustain the governor's veto, and that will allow commercial landlords to take people's houses now, if that's what you want. If you want to say they have till after Christmas, then you stand with the majority of this body and you override the governor's veto. You got it wrong.
Are we good? So, Madam Speaker, on the bill, Madam Speaker, on the bill, you know, the idea here is that just like a restaurant, just like a small business, landlords too are small businesses that have the same obligations. I'm not sure about the rhetoric about Ebenezer Scrooge and whether the governor got it right or wrong. What I'm here to say to you is that a contract is a private responsibility between two parties that agree to do certain things. And I'm saying that landlords have those same responsibilities as does a tenant. All right, and so this idea that the state of Maryland, which by the way is talking about a COVID environment, an emergency environment that doesn't exist today, I would think that a future governor could theoretically resolve this. For example, the Relief Act, as we were trying to get money to the businesses like the restaurants. I mean, there's other ways to do that than through legislative obligation. And my point on the bill and why I would support the governor's veto is that I would say on balance the governor did a good job under almost impossible circumstances, along with the legislature, to resolve issues with businesses. Changing contract law to do the same seems a far reach, and that's why I'm going to support the governor's veto on this bill.
Is there any further debate? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 719. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Special order calendar number 1. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 1, Congressional Districting Plan. Bill on second reading. Favorable report adopted.
Recognizing the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do have an amendment at the desk for consideration. The number is 583029/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you. As all of us know, the reason why we're really here is to do congressional redistricting. We are here to pass a new map, as our legal duty is once every 10 years, to change the lines upon which our political colleagues who trundle off to Washington, D.C., and I'm not really sure what they do there some weeks, but whatever it is they do, this is how their districts get determined. I would like to thank the Speaker for allowing me, in my representative capacity on behalf of the Republican Party in this state, which is literally millions of people, I think, in terms of how you look at how they vote, how they're represented. I would like to thank the Speaker and the Senate President for allowing me the opportunity to participate on something called the Legislative Redistricting Advisory Commission. We'll just call it the LRAC, just so we can shorten things up a little bit. I think, to be fair and to be honest, that it's probably the first time in modern history, certainly modern history, that any of us would have been paying attention to politics, that any members of the minority party in this legislature were allowed in any capacity to really participate in the legislature's deliberations of the formations of a map. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the actions and the work of Madam Speaker and my friend the Majority Leader, who also participated from this House, along with members of the Senate, on that committee. But I still don't think that what that committee did is correct. And this amendment that is before you, as you all know, there was another committee, there was another commission. For the first time, again, probably in modern history, that any of us would have ever been paying attention to politics, the governor of the state of Maryland convened an independent redistricting commission. Rather than to have the governor place his or her finger upon the scales of the map and do it in the proverbial back room, some people like to say smoke-filled back rooms, I'm not going to go there, but to the extent that that existed, that's the first time that ever existed. Governor Hogan, to his credit, I believe, said, listen, I adhere to the principle that he's brought before this legislature now, really ever since he got elected, of independent, nonpartisan redistricting. He's offered bill after bill after bill. They haven't gone anywhere. We're all familiar with that. Of let's set up an independent commission. Not Republicans pick, not Democrats pick, not governors pick, not speakers choose. We'll set up an independent, citizen-driven commission. And because we never passed legislation to do that for a variety of reasons, he eventually wound up having the opportunity to do it by himself, and he did it. And what the amendment before you for consideration this morning is effectively the maps and the plan that that commission, the independent, nonpartisan Citizens Commission, of which there is zero evidence that I'm aware of that any particular politicians from the governor right down to the lowliest member in their own minds of the legislature had any real direct influence over or input into that map. There's no evidence whatsoever, and I don't believe there ever will be any uncovered, that any sitting member of Congress, any of our 8 elected members of the House of Representatives, had any direct input into that map. Because the concept used to be that every 2 years or every 4 years, whatever your election cycle is, the people got to go out and choose who represented them. But gerrymandering and redistricting, and I'm sure that we'll hear that it's a bipartisan scourge, and God knows it is. I will not stand in front of you and tell you that Republicans in other states do not do similar things, because that would be a lie, and it would be foolish to say that. But what the rules have changed to now, instead of every 2 or every 4 years, the people get to come out and pick who represents them. Instead, we pick every 10 years who we get to represent. We choose, whether at the direction of Congress people or based on our own partisan ideologies, we choose. And we say, I don't really care about what the people might think in this county or that county. I'm just going to use a computer system to draw a map that makes sure that I win, or that that particular person wins, or that that particular person is in the best position. What we've heard quite a bit about, if you participated in any of these processes or viewed the Rules Committee hearing yesterday, that there are some concepts that frequently get thrown about in redistricting as to whether or not it's fair, whether or not it's balanced, legal, rational. And some of the words include compactness, your district should be relatively compact. It shouldn't be spread out all over the place if it can be avoided. Contiguousness. It's places that actually touch each other. And communities of interest. It's places that when voters sit down, they identify fundamentally, whether it's through political subdivisions that already exist, whether it's through high schools, colleges, employers, geographic functions. I live in the mountains. Some of you live on the shore. There's differences. And that those concepts should be adhered to. And I think it would be impossible. I'm just going to briefly hold it up. I think others in later debates on this issue will have big whiteboards for you to look at. I'll just briefly hold it up. I don't know how many of you got a chance to look at the governor's map, his commission's map. It's really compact, and it's really pretty contiguous, and it represents communities of interest, as opposed to the HB1 bill that we're seeking to amend today. HB1 stretches 2 congressional districts from Montgomery County, virtually from the DC line to the Pennsylvania line. In one case, all the way to the Susquehanna River and the border between Cecil County and Harford County. Now, communities of interest is an interesting concept. I guess you can stretch it to whatever your mind will allow you to in good faith. But no one could suggest in good conscience that people who live on the Susquehanna River in Havre de Grace consider themselves to be of a community of interest with people who live in Montgomery County a few miles from the DC line. If that's the community of interest, then we're all in one big community of interest here in the state of Maryland. There are a variety of issues with the maps that we think could best be fixed by adopting the independent commission map. The chairman of the LRAC was an individual I had not known before, Mr. Arrow. I think he left service here before I joined. And I really developed a great appreciation for him. He's a person of intelligence. He's a person of commitment. I think he worked very hard in this role. But he said something yesterday that struck me in the Rules Committee hearing. He essentially said in response, I don't remember if it was in response to some questioning or as part of his presentation, that in his view, there really aren't any rules anymore for congressional redistricting other than that you comply with the Voting Rights Act, which the governor's commission's map certainly does, and I believe also that the LRAC map will. We comply with the Voting Rights Act, and that you have equal representation, meaning that each district, this sounds crazy to us, right, with the variations we have in our legislative districts, each district in Congress must be exactly the same in census-oriented population to one person. So every one of these districts, they go in, you get a constituent says, why do I vote in District 3 and my next door neighbor votes in District 4? That's probably because that's right where the line came and they literally dropped it down to one person. And what Mr. Arrow said yesterday essentially was, outside of those 2 requirements, that's it. Everything else is the wild, wild west. And he may be right. He may, under the federal decisions, the Supreme Court decisions, and what we here in Maryland call the Benesett case, that was based upon the lines that some folks in this room drew and voted for 10 years ago, which I think everyone would concede. I'm being fair and conceding that Republicans do this too. I think everyone else should be fair and concede that the map that was drawn 10 years ago is one of the most extreme examples of gerrymandering that existed in the country. The Supreme Court even acknowledged that, but they said we don't have a remedy for it, right? We don't have a remedy under federal law. And so maybe Mr. Arrow is correct. But I think that if you take a look at what we should be doing here, and you take a look at what your role is here, you would support this amendment. This amendment is not a Republican amendment. It's an amendment about keeping communities that are aligned, that are compact, that are contiguous, that have common interests, and enabling them to choose their representatives. And I'll tell you one anomaly. The population of the city of Baltimore, much like my area, has been in decline for many years. A congressional district today is roughly 771,000 people. You got to get 771,000 people to make a congressional district. City of Baltimore has less than 600,000 people today. That's a shame in a lot of ways. That's a shame. It's a shame that the same thing's happening to where I live. They could be fully subsumed within one congressional district with 171,000 people left over. But under the existing map, they're separated into 3 congressional districts. 3. Under the independent commission map and the subject of this amendment, they're fully contained within one map. That just makes sense. That's just not an example of extreme partisan gerrymandering. Those of us who live in Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore, we have to accept, we have to live in the real world and accept that our populations are small so that our districts are going to stretch far. Because it takes a long time coming from Garrett County or coming from Somerset County or Worcester County and going county by county by county of communities of interest to add up to 771,000 people. It takes a long time. People where I live don't have a lot of commonality with certain areas in Montgomery County. Probably don't have a lot of commonality with people in Baltimore or Carroll County as much either, but we have to accept that our districts are going to stretch into those areas. That's a fact. But for those of you, the majority in this building, who live in the I-95 corridor, most of you don't have to drive more than half an hour. 40 minutes, you can get 771,000 people. You don't have to go from Montgomery County to the Susquehanna River to get 771,000 people. You don't have to do some of the things. You don't have to go from the tip of St. Mary's County all the way and snake through Prince George's County, passing people to your left and to your right for dozens of miles to get to College Park and the Montgomery County line in order to make 771,000 people. You don't have to do that. There's no reason to do that other than we want to elect a particular person to that job, and that's the way they want it. I encourage you today to support the independent commission map. I don't know how much people pay attention to polling. I'm not a huge polling person myself. But I think if you look at any type of public opinion polling that has been done for years of actual voters, not politicians, voters, they will say, I would prefer to have an independent or nonpartisan process for redistricting. I would prefer to have a compact, a contiguous map for redistricting. I don't understand why we have some of the crazy maps we have. And people are going to get up and say, well, we have them in other states led by Republican legislatures. We do. I can't change that. One of the hardest struggles, I think, for any of us in our lives, we become adults, we move through this passage of life, is to understand there's only so many things you can do. You can't change it all. You can't fix it all. You can just do the best that you can do. So when you get up and look in the mirror and you say, did I do what was right? You did that. Maryland has a clause. I'm going to close simply with this. In 1776, a few feet from this building, Maryland's Declaration of Rights was passed. And it has a clause that says that free elections are so fundamental to the right of people to participate in the legislature, and they're the best security of liberty and the foundation of free government, that all elections ought to be free and frequent. I respect the position of people in this room when they suggest we need to broaden the franchise, we need to help people vote. As long as you can do that with election security, making sure there's no fraud, I can support that. But is it a free election to say, hey, I already drew the line of where you get to vote? If I just took Howard County, if I just took Montgomery County, this is who we get, but I'll draw the lines and snake them all together, and I already know who's going to win. In at least the vast majority of our congressional districts, time after time, is it a free election? We already know who's going to win. We know who's going to win before they even sign up. As long as you sign up, you're the incumbent, it's been drawn to benefit you, you win. Is that a free election under Maryland's law? I don't care what the Supreme Court said or didn't say. We're from Maryland, right? We're all proud of that, right? Maryland. Declaration of Rights. If you pass this amendment, you're supporting free elections. You're supporting common sense. You're supporting independent, nonpartisan redistricting, come what may. Whether it helps me, whether it helps you, whether it helps Speaker Pelosi, whether it helps Minority Leader McCarthy, I don't care. I want to do something that's right, that's fair, that's free, that's legal for the voters. And I hope you take that into consideration with the amendment and the commission's maps that are before you today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, everyone. Let me start with this. There are a million ways to draw a map, and there are dozens of potential considerations you could take into account in drawing a map. Now, under Maryland law, the governor has no constitutional role in either congressional or legislative redistricting, really. He appointed members of commission who I think are well-meaning people who did their best. And And the map that they propose is the map that the gentleman from Allegheny County is proposing here. It's the map that's preferred by the Republican governor and by Republicans in the legislature, and we heard testimony from Republican central committees and Republican candidates for office at all levels and Republican activists in our hearing yesterday. But let me just say this. You know, the gentleman's argument was centered around a confession that he thinks there is nothing we can do about the lack of guidance at the federal level. That the federal government, Supreme Court, and Congress have not given us clear guidance beyond the two very narrow exceptions that he described. And then he went on to say that there's nothing he can do about that, except there is. There is. There is a law right now that has passed the United States House of Representatives. It's sitting in the Senate of the United States. It would require nonpartisan redistricting commissions in every single state in the Union. And I'd encourage my colleagues in the minority party to express their support for that bill to Republicans in the United States Senate who currently are not supporting it. And the governor, too, actually, who claimed to have a role in the passage of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. If he's that influential in the Senate, I would encourage him to call for the passage of the For the People Act and guarantee a move towards nonpartisan commissions in every single state in America. I would join in that call. But we make maps under the rules we have. And under the rules we have, we created a legislative redistricting advisory commission that undertook a thorough process of public input. That commission produced a map that was informed by testimony from both written and oral from hundreds of citizens across the state. It included 10 in-person public hearings in every corner of the state of Maryland. It included 2 Zoom public hearings to allow people that couldn't make the in-person hearings to participate. It included a public hearing yesterday by the Rules Committee, and the result of that is the LRAC map, which is the original bill under House Bill 1. And I would encourage our members to resist this amendment and to support the LRAC map that is underlying in House Bill 1.
Recognizing the gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wasn't going to get too much into this today, but I understand that there's a lot going on politically, especially at the federal level, but we're talking about Maryland today. And the argument was just made that the governor has no role in the process and we're following the rules before us. And the rule, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the rule we're following is Article 3, Section 5 of the Constitution. And in the second paragraph, it starts, the governor shall present the plan to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Delegates. It says, the governor shall present the plan to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Delegates. Maybe I'm missing the rules we're operating under, but it's very clear in the Constitution. I don't think it's up for interpretation where the plan's supposed to originate. I know this is a little bit different. We haven't had Republican governors offering or being a part of this process, but I'm happy to stand in support of this amendment because I'm completely confident that the approach and the effort and the time that was taken to compile this plan was truly on a nonpartisan basis. And not only was it on a nonpartisan basis, but it was dedicated to the voters, the citizens, the people who are a part of the contract of this Constitution. Where's their end of the deal? Where is their appeal? Where is their voice? They've been given an opportunity, but they're being excluded because of politics, because there's a Republican governor, and we haven't had a Republican governor, and this is a new process. I get it. It's hard. How do you justify that, especially in a political year, to your constituents when you're the majority party in the legislature? But think long and hard about what's going on in society today and the world at large, right? There's no rush. We've got time. Take a look at the map. I don't know how many people have actually had the opportunity to participate in the work that the governor's office has done and this nonpartisan commission has done. And I don't want to be misconstrued. The governor's office wasn't involved with that commission at all. They set it up. But it's not even been considered as second rate. It's not even been given any attention. But if you read the Constitution, what's got us to where we are, that should be the premier. That should be the starting point. And for some reason, unfortunately, I think we all know why, it just isn't being given the due respect that's required. And that's required by the law. It's required by the Constitution. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not a litigator. But to say that the process says the governor has no role on the record, to me, is absurd. I support the amendment. I hope everybody takes the time to think about what we're doing today and to take the time to appreciate the work and even look at the map that the governor's proposed. Thank you.
Recognizing the gentleman from Charles County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just heard the colleagues speak. The governor did have a plan, and he presented it. And to say that he did not get the respect is erroneous because he had a hearing. Just because we didn't do what he liked, that doesn't mean there's something illegal going on. See, we keep talking about fact versus feeling. That's his feeling, but our Constitution doesn't support that feeling because we are the voice of the people. He may have appointed a body that drew their maps, but we're the voice. We're a people's legislature. It's our job to say what we want for our people. That's what we're doing here today. So the governor's map was given respect. He had a hearing. He just didn't get what he wanted. That doesn't mean the process is broken. At the end of the day, we heard earlier about this free and fair election. I was a little confused because, again, are we going to talk fact or feeling? If I feel that I want to go up in Frederick County and vote, that doesn't mean that you guys need to draw a map that allows me to do that. Even if I feel I want to participate in Frederick County's elections. See, we have a process, and that's what we engaged in. You may not like it. You may not feel that it's good, but that's not factual. I need to discuss a little stuff since we've gotten into the legality of it. Let's start with the first thing, that there's an inference that this map is constitutionally sound and legally sufficient. The progenitor of this map was a 2011 map that was approved by the courts. There are traditional factors or permissible considerations when drafting a legislative map that the court looks at and that this committee looked at, as in preserving communities of interest. For those that don't know, that's a group of people, specific geographic areas share a common interest. Does not necessarily respect political boundaries, cities or state county lines. Things like historical communities, retail communities, immigrant communities, you get it. It's a term of art. There is no legal standard, but these are traditional factors that are used, and this committee used them. In addition, they looked at the compactness. And if you look at the last map to this one, you'll see the dramatic change. Contiguity. Easy, because making sure everything's connected. Our courts have said that they have to be touching, adjoining, or connected. The committee followed that. Other things they followed are natural boundaries, respecting political boundaries, protecting incumbency, recognizing growth, and most particularly for this map and this committee, keeping residents in their prior districts. See, the Supreme Court didn't require those factors to be adhered to, but they are indeed objective factors that are used to defend claims of an unfair gerrymandering. The committee knows this because this was the basis of their drawing. Now, we also could talk about one person, one vote, and I don't want to bore you guys and take you back to law school, but I have to briefly cover this. It is a constitutional standard that basically says that each of the districts need to be the same size. The deviation is 0 when it comes to congressional districts. So that magic number of 771,925 people, that's what we got per district, guaranteeing one person, one vote. And lastly, we look to make sure the maps adhere to the Equal Protection Clause and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to protect the rights of minorities in our county and our states, preserving the strength of our minority and majority districts. So basically what we're not allowed to do is intentionally drawing districts based on race without sufficient justification. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act states that basically individuals, it protects our democracy from racial discrimination by prohibiting an electoral practice or procedure that minimizes or dilutes or cancels the voting strengths of members of a racial or language minority group or voting population. This was done. We focused on making sure not only do we preserve our minority districts and strengthen them, but we did nothing to dilute them. Because there's something called cracking, there's something called packing. I'm sure we'll hear these things basically where sometimes they'll dilute the minority vote by dividing it up, or they'll pack all minorities into one district, as in what North Carolina did in District 1 and District 12 for minority voters, or West Virginia did in 6 districts by bringing them into 3. Or they crack it, what Pennsylvania did, by cutting up their urban populations to support and dilute their vote. See, these are the things that are already being done. I don't think any of us are so weak that we cannot address those. We take buses to support voting in other states. I'm pretty sure we could deal with that too. See, in conclusion, the shape of Maryland is not pleasing to the eye. It is misshapen and oddly proportioned. Population is not evenly distributed. There are heavily populated areas, and there are also miles of forest and farmland. That's why the courts refrained from determining the shape of our congressional districts. And as you heard, there are a million different ways to draw a map, but this is the map that we drew. It's compact, contiguous, cohesive, and it was approved by the courts based on a map approved by the courts. See, instead of focusing on appearance, the committee focused on creating more competitive districts, protecting communities of interest, protecting the voting rights of minorities, and keeping as many individuals in their previous district as possible. Therefore, protecting that relationship between the citizens, the businesses, the communities, and their federally elected officials. As I stated earlier, by the standards laid out and opined by our courts, this map is sound. It is legally sufficient and easily passes constitutional muster. And lastly, it is right, it is fair, and it is legal. Thank you.
Recognizing Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to correct the record a second earlier because reference was made to the state constitution. I believe if the gentleman rereads it, he'll find that it's referring to the submission of state legislative districts and not congressional districts.
Very briefly.
Minority
Madam
Leader.
Speaker. Thank you, and I appreciate the comments from my friend from Charles County, but I would only suggest to you this. I just want to make sure that when we talk about the redistricting in terms of cracking and packing and the effect that they have upon minority votes, that's not my amendment. That's not the independent commission map. There is zero, less than zero evidence from any perspective to suggest that the map that was created by the citizens of the state of Maryland through an independent, nonpartisan commission packs or cracks or dilutes minority voting rights whatsoever. Whatsoever. It will result in the same number of Voting Rights Act districts as what currently exists, and it will likely result in the election of the same individuals who exist from those communities where minority populations make up the majority of that particular political subdivision. It's interesting, we look at political subdivisions for Voting Rights Act purposes, but yet we don't want to talk about political subdivisions being a touchstone for redistricting. But you look at it when the Voting Rights Act, you say, well, that county or that area or that city has a majority minority population, so they cannot by law, which is correct, which is right and proper, they cannot by law be artificially separated or lumped together in a way that disenfranchises them as a total population. So we're going to look at it in that circumstance, but we're not going to look at it when we talk about communities of interest. We're going to tie Havre de Grace with Lower Montgomery County. We're going to tie Potomac with Manchester. We're going to tie Ocean City with Odenton. We're going to do that because the map maker said we can with a computer system, and if we do that, we guarantee that these, it's not even a guarantee that just someone from the majority party will win. It's a guarantee that that particular person will win who's there now. Who's there now. I guess there are bosses. They determine, hey, draw the map for me so I can keep winning. That's not what voters want. I just encourage you to think about that as you cast these votes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Hartford.
Madam Speaker?
I said gentlelady from Hartford.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a couple questions of the minority leader, if I might.
Minority Leader.
Well, sure.
Okay.
That's a switch, sure.
You were on the legislative committee map making, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Do you know anything about the governors, and I'm going to just call it the governors because it's easier to distinguish, but the independent committee that was formed through legislation, or not legislation, but through the governor? Are you familiar with it?
All I know about it is the general composition and that they conducted public hearings. I wasn't a participant. I think I sent a letter when they had a hearing directed towards Western Maryland, but other than that, I had no involvement.
Okay, so on the governor's thing, didn't he have like 3 independents?
Yes.
And then he had 3 Democrats.
Yes.
And he had 3 Republicans.
Yes, so he appointed a chair, 3 co-chairs, one of whom was a registered Republican by the name of Walter Olson, who's been involved in redistricting discussions for years. One of whom is a registered Democrat, a retired federal judge and former Prince George's County State's Attorney, the Honorable Alexander Williams, and a lady, I shouldn't start naming the names because I forget her last name. I think it was Catherine or Kathleen Hetherington or Harrington, who was a registered independent and I believe was the president of the Howard County Community College at the time. Those individuals, they then had a fairly complicated lottery process where people could sign up to be selected, and they had a tranche for Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and those people got picked randomly, essentially, from the applicants to fill out the rest of the commission.
So in other words, the governor wasn't micromanaging this group, was he?
To the best of my knowledge, absolutely not.
Okay. Well then, and so he basically, when my colleague from, I believe it was Charles County, said that this is the governor's map, the governor wasn't involved in the redistricting of this commission, was he?
I have no evidence to suggest, nor would I think any would ever be found, that the governor or at his direction did anything to influence the way that the congressional district maps were drawn, other than to provide the general rules for the commission at the beginning, which encouraged them to do things like draw compact districts, contiguous districts, try to abide by communities of interest and political subdivisions. Other than those general precepts, I'm not the governor, so I can't tell you everything that he ever did or said in his life, but I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that.
Okay, so I want to ask you something. There's a Princeton nonpartisan group that is studying gerrymandering. Is that correct?
I have heard of that.
Princeton University. They're kind of like a pretty prestigious institution.
I would say so. I certainly couldn't have gotten in there out of high school, so I'm sure it's a good school.
Okay. And so they rated the governor's map, and I just use that governor's map because it's simple, because I can keep the two separate. They rated that an A, didn't they?
I believe so.
Okay. And then the LRAC committee map that they're saying is so great that my colleague from Charles County says is the greatest thing since sliced bread, they rated that an F, correct?
That is what I have read in the print media, yes.
Okay, all right. So this group is nonpartisan. They're just evaluating the goals of what these districts should look like, correct?
That's my understanding of what they attempt to do.
All right. So if I look at the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission map, Baltimore City is very, very compact, correct?
It appears to me to be all of the city is included within one district that then, in order to meet the 771,000 number, bleeds out a little bit south into what I would call northern Anne Arundel County.
Okay, but if you look at the final recommended congressional map of LRAC, it looks like, gee whiz, it looks like the District 3, which we currently have, which is considered the broken wing pterodactyl. It's been rated the absolute first congressional district in the whole country as far as being gerrymandered, and also has been called a crime scene blood splatter. It looks like it hasn't much improved under the LRAC, because I honestly cannot figure out what counties they're in. It looks like they go up into Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, maybe into the Eastern Shore. Well, I guess.
Referring to 3rd District?
Yeah, the map.
The 3rd District extends from Montgomery County. It takes in part of Carroll County, Howard County, Baltimore City, and Harford County.
Okay, well, ain't that great? That doesn't tell me it's a really compact map, and I guess my concern has always been, even with the current district that former Congressman Cummings had, he represented areas in Baldwin and Baltimore City, and I'm thinking Baldwin's, what do I want to say? It's kind of a rural, suburban, as opposed to the city, which is urban. And I just don't think that being able to try to navigate who my constituents are and what they really want, I mean, that really spreads thin. And I would kind of like you to comment on that as far as the LRAC map.
All I would suggest to you is that very clearly, as I think I've said, there are several districts within the LRAC map which have no statistical need, no need in order to connect communities of interest or compact and contiguous political subdivisions. They have no need to stretch across that. I mean, everybody knows where they live, everybody knows what the relative populations are. There's really no mathematical need, there's no constitutional need to connect all of those counties that I just described, the majority of which, with the possible exception of Carroll, probably all have more than 300,000 people in each one of those counties. And some of them, Montgomery obviously has well over 1 million. There's really no need to do that. I will suggest to you, not to disagree with you, but the 3rd District, as you pointed out, I mean, it's been described in a lot of ways under the current map. It is, you can't even really fathom it on the current map how it was constructed to connect together. This 3rd District is possibly better only by dint of the fact that you couldn't be worse. And I give credit to folks who acknowledged that from day one in the LRAC process and said, hey, we can't go with the existing map, in part because the 3rd District really is just a mess in terms of how it is constructed. So this is the effort to try to improve that from the majority of the LRAC, but I would agree with you that there's no earthly reason to have to stretch from Montgomery County to the Susquehanna River to make a congressional district.
So I guess my ultimate question is, why would we want to pass a map that's been rated as an F instead of we could have a map that's been rated as an A and basically has been extremely transparent?
So my hope is that our colleagues will consider that, and that's the purpose of this amendment, is to substitute that map that has been analyzed by independent experts, so to speak, as being a much more rational, fair, and non-gerrymandered map. That's the point of the amendment.
So just to kind of close up, because I know I've taken a bit of time here, it seems to me Maryland has always prided itself as being number one and being the most, let's say, as far as education, funding of education, very proud of being very progressive. So I guess my question to you is, it doesn't look like the LRAC map is progressive and we're moving in the right direction. Is that fair to say?
I'll leave that to people's interpretation of what they think the word progressive means or doesn't mean. I would suggest, and that's why we're here on the amendment, that the independent commission map is obviously a more fair, more rational, more compact, more contiguous map. Okay. Whether or not the LRAC map can withstand legal challenges, I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you I'm not would purport to be a legal expert in this particular arena, but I can tell you that there are very few, if any, reported cases of the Maryland Court of Appeals interpreting the free election clause of our Declaration of Rights. And I can tell you that in 2 states, Pennsylvania and North Carolina, that have free election clauses worded slightly differently than ours, the Democratic Party of those states was able to change their congressional districts in the last few years by suing in state court, not federal, and alleging that the gerrymanders that Republican majorities in those states had created violated their own state constitutional rights to a free and fair election. That's what happened in those states. Whether that happens here, I'll leave that up to 7 better people than me who sit a few miles down from us in Annapolis, but that's where we stand.
Thank you, Madam
John
Speaker.
Lady from
and thank
Baltimore
you.
County. And Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Body, this feels a lot like an ends justify the means conversation. It feels like one we've had before. It feels like the kind of thing where you tell your children, you shouldn't just do what's right because it's expedient, you should do it because it's right. History is not going to look back on this body's decision kindly. We all know it. We all know why it's happening, and they're not. They're going to judge us, and they're going to say that we did this for the wrong reasons. I actually took some time to watch a lot of these commission hearings. And I, as someone who's not really a big fan of government and doesn't think it works very well, was pretty impressed. It was like a conversation almost. It was a responsive conversation with the people and the nonpartisan board about what they wanted their state to look like. This doesn't have to do with the funky shape of Maryland or anything else. This is about drawing actually contiguous lines. And the nonpartisan commission was, I think, one of the best examples of a working and functional government body that I have ever witnessed. We should not be snubbing our noses at this opportunity to teach not only our children, but the future generations of this state what it looks like to do something that's right even when it's hard, and even when we don't like it. That is what we're asking you. That is what the minority party is asking you. That is what the millions and millions of voters that represent both the right, the middle, and Democrats, many of whom testified yesterday that they were appalled. Appalled. You have an opportunity here, body, to do something that's right, even though it's hard. And isn't that the real reason why we were all elected? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wonder if the gentlelady from Hartford County who was asking questions, the Minority Leader, would rise to some questions.
Gentlelady from Hartford County.
How
Yes,
are
sir.
you today?
Pardon?
How are you today?
I'm happy. This is a great day.
Good, good. You had mentioned
What relevance does that have to anything?
I believe he was asking you the questions, okay?
Okay. I'm on a roll, Madam Speaker.
Oh, I was just asking how you were doing. I'm sorry that offended you. You had mentioned the governor's map created by this commission that the governor created. Who appointed the members of that commission?
I don't know because I'm not that thorough. But it doesn't really matter. The point is that he wasn't micromanaging it.
It does matter. It does matter because our entire constitutional system of governance is based on the concept that the people get to elect their representatives and not one man sitting on the second floor of the building. He does not get to decide who makes decisions for the people of
Do
Maryland.
you think that, well, so you don't take a great deal of pride that this map was laid, that the legislative map is an F?
Well, let's talk about that. So the Princeton Gerrymandering Project grades have been mentioned repeatedly. They did. Do you know what factors they considered in assigning their scores?
I'm just a regular person like my constituents.
I understand.
And the optics don't look good, and the map that you're proposing doesn't look good.
I understand, but
But it doesn't look compact.
hearing
and I
this-
think my minority leader went through it very well, explaining why it isn't compact, that it doesn't keep communities of interest together. And why do we want to have our legislators needing a GPS still to figure out where their district is?
Sure, but
I mean, no, I mean,
my question,
we haven't moved
my
the
question
ball
was
forward at all.
My question was about the factors that the Princeton gerrymandering project considered. They didn't consider, for example, part of their grading system does not include whether districts represent minority populations in a state. So is it the position of people that are citing those grades that the minority voters in Maryland, that their need to be represented in legislative bodies should not be considered?
I think that that's the point is that Republicans are minorities. That if you're splitting populations up that have different needs and interests, you're weakening their ability for their representative to adequately advocate for them. I mean, how could someone that represents Baltimore City advocate for rural areas? Their concerns are different. Their lifestyles are different. I just kind of think that makes it much more hard to represent somebody. I don't represent, in my district, a lot of rural areas. I represent basically suburban municipal area. That makes it real clear what I need to do. I think when you start splitting things up and you have folks representing their districts are far and wide and scattered like that, that just makes it more difficult. It's going to be harder for people to know who their representatives are. I mean, they already have that problem with redistricting as it is, but then when you have somebody doesn't really, live in their area, it makes it much more complicated. So I didn't study the whole issue of how many majority, minority, and all of that. I'm just saying the map speaks for itself. It's like common sense. You can see it. And you know darn well it's not going to be that easy to traverse it and to know who your representative is by just looking at it.
Majority
the other thing
Leader.
is your map doesn't really
Thank you,
show
Madam Speaker.
where the counties are. So it's hard to figure out where the district, I think it's District 3, what counties it is. I don't know. I can't tell by looking at it.
Okay, can you let him respond back to you? He heard you.
I don't have a
Majority Leader.
response back to her. I was asking a question. I didn't.
Yeah,
Perhaps I'll ask the Minority Leader instead. The Princeton gerrymandering project grades that keep getting cited do not include considerations of minority representation. Is it the position of the minority party that should not be a consideration of redistricting?
No, that's not our position at all. I'll be frankly honest with you. I'm not an expert in the Princeton gerrymandering project, and frankly, I really don't care as to what their analysis is. My point in this amendment and in this debate is that all of us in this room know what we're doing and what we're not doing and why we're doing it and why we're not doing it. And my perspective is that all we should be worried about is our own consciences and our own understanding of what's fair and what's right and what's legal and what's proper for the people of the state of Maryland. So I certainly have no position. I believe, and we work together on the LRAC to ensure that I think under both maps, both the amendment map, the commission map, and the map the LRAC proposed, both of them are fully compliant with the Voter Rights Act. They take into account where minority populations live.
I hear you.
And they make sure that they do that.
I just want to make sure that if we're citing grades and numbers and that we understand exactly what we're citing. My final question for you. So this issue has been brought up, you've brought it up repeatedly, of the distance between some districts in the state of Maryland, arguing that the distance from one side to the other of a district should mean that we shouldn't use it. Well, the biggest distance in a congressional district under the LRAC plan is in the 1st Congressional District, which is more than 160 miles driving time from one end to the other. So is it your position that the Eastern Shore should be split into 2 congressional districts to make more compact districts?
No, I think that's a function of the reality of math. As I had mentioned, that those of us in far western Maryland and the Eastern Shore have to acknowledge that because our populations are so small, that you're going to have to go a much, much, much farther distance, stacking together counties, neighboring communities in order to get to the 771. So simply the fact that the district is long or narrow or from north to south, that doesn't matter if you have to do that, if you're required to do that in order to meet the population requirements of the United States Constitution. If, on the other hand, you're darting in and out of communities that you would never have to do that already have the population base to form a district, you're doing it for a particular reason, and the reason isn't to make a compact, contiguous map that reflects communities of interest, it's to get a result.
I appreciate the responses. And again, this is one of those issues where there are real differences between us on what we think about these maps, and that's okay. I understand that this amendment embodies the map that is preferred by our Republican governor and our Republican colleagues and Republican activists and elected officials. I understand that. But I would ask the body to resist the amendment and to pursue the LREP.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had a question for the Majority Leader. I followed.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? No, almost afternoon. Still morning.
Good nearly afternoon.
My stomach's telling me it's getting to be afternoon. I followed the governor's or the Citizens Redistricting Commission from day one and how they operated, and it was very transparent. I participated in it. I put written comments in. That was all transparent. And they clearly had a list of things that they wanted to consider of putting together good maps. And we've talked about a lot of them today, whether it's compactness, recognizing political boundaries, which are your counties, which we go by in Maryland. You know, counties are our main efforts of how we operate, compactness, continuity, all those things that we've talked about of good redistricting process. We just talked about the Princeton project, and you asked them, I think you asked two folks here, what that entailed. I don't really know. I just know that they're respected. It was a grade that came out. They're respected throughout the country, and they're talked about a lot on the news by both sides. So I don't look at this as an R&D issue. I know a lot of people do. I look at it as who the representatives are and making good districts and letting the stakes fall where they may. And I listened to the entire yesterday your hearing from the LRAC Commission for both commissions. And I listened to the Citizens Commission tell clearly how they made their maps, how they went about it, the number of people that participated, the number of meetings that they had, 4,100 people, X number of meetings. And then I listened to the group that you put together. And they basically talked about going around the state, 10 meetings, which I appreciate that the senator put 900 miles on her car. And that's all fine, but you never said how many people participated. I believe that there was very few people that participated because there were no maps to look at. You were just going in general saying, what do you think? And there was nothing to look at until 2 weeks ago. So my question, and they never talked about what direction you gave to the map maker. What criteria did you give to the map maker, this commission that you worked on, the LRAC? What did you tell the map maker how to design the map? I mean, where did that come from? Did you tell them, what criteria did you give the map maker from Department of Legislative Services to say how these maps will be drawn?
I'm happy to answer your question, but we're out of order here. This amendment, the debate right now is on the amendment which would replace the current map with the
Well, what I'm
governor's
trying to figure out, I'm trying to decide whether we should replace it. I know what process the Governor's Commission went through, or the Citizens Redistricting Commission. I know how this map came about. So I'm trying to decide, okay, how did your map come about? What direction did you give the map maker to draw the map?
As already described by the delegate from Charles County, we considered a number of factors that are factors that have been longstanding factors considered in redistricting and or factors that we're required to consider by existing case law. That includes communities of interest, compactness and contiguity, making sure that we don't crack or pack minority populations to ensure that all Maryland voters have the ability to make decisions about who's going to represent them and not a commission established by a governor. On top of that, the longstanding practice in redistricting of trying to make sure we don't arbitrarily move millions of people around congressional districts. We try to make sure we keep the core of populations in a given district in that district as a result of redistricting.
Well, that's not what happened last time, 10 years ago. As you know, you were here and I was here. So I guess that changed, and I understand it.
I'm glad you like these maps better.
No, my point that I'm trying to make, I've never seen anything or any direction that was given to the map maker. I hear it today on the floor, but clearly there was a document that the Citizens Commission put out and said, these are the ways that we are going to consider these maps. And people responded to that, and they wanted it. They positively responded to it. I've never seen any direction except what was just said on the floor to the map maker before the maps were drawn to say, okay, Miss DLS person drawing the map, we want you to keep counties of interest together. We want you to keep communities of interest. I did not see any of that or hear any of that in the testimony yesterday during the presentation of the alternative map. I call it the LRAC map.
Every single one of the factors I just mentioned was talked about in the testimony yesterday.
It wasn't talked about at all, and that's what I was missing. I was taking notes while I was listening to it, and I never heard anyone say. I heard someone ask the question, and then someone else who said they were not involved at all, Carl Arrow said he wasn't involved at all, then he started to answer the question. And I said, well, you just said you weren't involved at all in the maps, and the person that made the maps didn't answer the question. So I'm asking you, as the leader of the group, what direction did you give to the map maker as a group? I mean, I'm sure you voted on these concepts. What directions did you give to the map maker to draw the maps?
I just told you. I just said that those were the goals in the process.
Is it written somewhere that we can look at it? Is it transparently said? Or did you just talk about it in a meeting and they picked it up? Because I don't see it. I see it in the Citizens Redistricting Commission clearly had it on their website. These are the issues that we're trying to follow. I didn't see that anywhere with the LRAC group.
We're on the floor of the House of Delegates. I just responded to your question.
Okay, well, I don't really think that was an answer. And the person from Charles County who told us what they considered wasn't on the commission, so I'm not sure. I guess you can admit that it doesn't exist. A clear set of direction to the map maker to tell them how to draw the maps of considerations, as you mentioned, the Princeton considerations. The Citizens Commission had clear considerations, clearly said we want these things to occur, and that obviously doesn't exist for the LRAC map. So I am going to support the map that seems to be more transparent and follow the principles of good redistricting, which is before us here in the amendment before us. So I support the Minority Leader's amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I always enjoy the debate when politicians are debating a political bill and trying to beat around the bush and say it's not political. That's always an enjoyment. I'm going to give you a little background on some of the politics of this, because I remember prior to the 2000 redistricting, Maryland was represented by 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. We had some balance in our state. We go through redistricting in 2000, and our congressional district, or congressional delegation of 8 members, it now goes to 6 and 2. We get through redistricting again in 2010, and the delegation goes 7 and 1. But yet somehow Governor Hogan gets reelected. Matter of fact, 2 of the last 3 governors have been Republicans. So this is bad for our state. I mean, there's definitely more Democrats than Republicans in the state of Maryland, but it's not 7 to 1. We're hearing on this debate today talking about fairness. My colleague, good friend, says the map was approved by the courts. And then we've just had a lot of discussion talking about map makers. What's funny, the map maker that drew this map, the LRAC's map, is the same person that drew the map in 2010. Let me pull up a quick Google search. I'm going to read you a quote from former Governor O'Malley, who was under deposition. I did everything in my power to draw the map that would be more favorable to the election of Democratic congressional delegation. He's admitting under oath that the last map was gerrymandered. And then my colleagues are saying that this map builds on that old map. Well, that would make this map gerrymandered. You contrast that. You know, it's ironic. When we lead with like a voter ID amendment here, we always talk about disenfranchising voters. That's the reason why we don't have a voter ID in Maryland. Well, this map, the LRAC map, disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of voters just in Congressional District 6 alone. It's gerrymandered. You contrast with what the governor's bipartisan legislative commission did. They had like 36 public meetings, I think, taking community input, putting together a much more cohesive map. That's the right way to do it. Provide some balance in the state. I happily support the gentleman's amendment inserting the bipartisan commission, because I think we should be working bipartisan in the state of Maryland. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Charles.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate my colleague's input. Appreciate him expressing his feelings on this map. But what I expressed was case law. What I expressed is what the courts did. I expressed the objective standards that are used in drafting a map, not your feelings, not how you feel it should look. When I was talking about the odd shape of Maryland, I wasn't picking on the state for those who might be sensitive. I was saying it's a weirdly shaped state, so you're not going to have straight and direct lines. We discussed how we have very condensed populations then surrounded by forest farmlands. So it's not going to be the perfect shape you may want it to be. But what I laid out specifically was this map, following these standards, was legal. That the prior map that we just heard our former governor opine, give us his feelings about, was also upheld by the courts. So one of the things I've heard over and over is it legal? Because that's what the standard should be. Are we doing something illegal here? I think we all know that answer is no. Is it something you feel differently about that you may not like? But I laid out the facts. And the facts are we did it. We kept everything that the courts required us to do. We made sure that we took into account keeping our citizens, as many of them came in their original districts. We didn't start from scratch and do something random because we had a map that had been approved by the courts. This isn't about your feelings. This is about the facts. Did we follow what we were obligated to do by the court systems? Yes, we did. Did we follow case law? Yes, we did. Did we take into consideration preserving communities of interest, preserving communities of color, compactness, contiguity, natural boundaries, political boundaries, incumbency? So what we didn't do is say, you know what, this is a county and this is a county, so let's draw the lines here. Because that's pretty much what the governor's map is, packing counties together. And as I've already stated, and the courts have found, communities of interest go beyond county lines. So I appreciated hearing everybody's feelings, but I told you the facts. I laid out the facts. I laid out the law for specific reasons. Because I've heard over and over from our colleagues across the line that our feelings don't matter. I won't say your feelings don't matter. When you're voting today, please take your facts into account. Please oppose the governor's legislation, the governor's bill, because we understand that what he started from was feelings. I'm sticking to the facts. I ask you to go along with me. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Are you offended?
The gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The governor has tried to change the way we draw districts in Maryland since he got elected. And the bill that he put forward in 2017, which went to the Ways and Means Committee, was House Bill 385 in 2017, titled Redistricting Reform Act of 2017. The governor has made every effort, here's the bill, he's made every effort to once and for all take redistricting in Maryland out of the hands of politicians and put it into the hands of the people. But the Ways and Means Committee, of course, killed this bill in 2017. And that's why the governor had to appoint a commission that would be an independent commission to meet anyway. It wasn't like he didn't try to put legislation in to finally take once and for all this decision-making process out of the hands of this body. He actually made the effort time and time again. And so the reason I support this amendment, the amendment of the House Minority Leader, is because this amendment is the work of the people. This is what the people have said they want. But the bill the majority wants to pass in this body is what they want. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County want to explain his vote? Gentleman from Western Maryland wants to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To explain my vote,
American voters are largely united in their opposition of partisan gerrymandering, according to many of the polls I have read ahead of our upcoming once-per-decade redrawing of Maryland voting maps. Nearly 9 out of 10 voters oppose the use of redistricting in a manner that aims to help one political party or certain politicians to win an election. Partisan gerrymandering in our country is one of the most nefarious forms of political adulteration, disenfranchising both Republicans, Democrats, and independents. It is not hard to see why nearly everyone wants to see this practice banned once and for all. Colleagues, please take this into consideration in joining me in voting yea for this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Howard to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this, and I urge all of my colleagues to do the same. Over 25 years ago, I joined our United States Air Force, and one of the core values is service before self. I am voting for this because it puts Marylanders above what we do here. Technically, I will not get reelected if I vote for this. If this map is passed, I will not get reelected to this body. But I think it is more important for all of us to put service before self and push forward on this amendment. Thank you so much.
May I remind the gentleman this is a congressional map?
Yes, ma'am.
Clerk will call the roll. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Special order counter, vetoed House Bill 16. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 16, Correctional Services, Immigration Detention Prohibition, Dignity Not Detention Act.
Recognizing Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions have been answered.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive?
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will call the
Madam
gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I rise to support the governor's veto, HB 16, on the bill, and I appreciate your brief indulgence. This is a story of a young man. The year was 1944, and the U.S. was entering one of the largest military counteroffensive operations in our country's history. This young man was a staff sergeant, a squad leader of an infantry unit. Leading his men into battle, he received multiple wounds, shrapnel, grenades, gunshots. His colleagues were repeatedly killed around him. Matter of fact, this battle had 90,000 Americans killed or wounded or captured. Battle of the Bulge. You ask yourself why a young man would put themselves in such a precarious situation if they didn't have to, with their whole lives ahead of them. The Army at the time was offering a program for people to get their citizenship by joining the fight for their country. This man took the opportunity. Luckily, he survived. He returned home to Pennsylvania, enrolled in the local university, got a degree in construction management, started a business to provide for his family, to carve out his American dream. That young immigrant was my grandfather, who was not a U.S. citizen when he entered the war, but he took that opportunity to become one. I share this story so that people know how much I appreciate the sacrifices and the contributions of the immigrants that have made to our great country and our great state.
But HB 16 is not a bill that honors the sacrifices and contributions of our immigrant community. It's a bill about crime. The bill simply addresses the issue of what do we do when an individual commits a crime in our community and happens to not have the appropriate documentation. To elaborate on this point, there are 195 countries in the world. 193 of them require U.S. citizens to provide a valid passport for entry. The only two exceptions, Canada and Mexico. So if you don't have a passport, they don't let you in. And if they let you in, there's a time limit. And if you exceed that time limit, they kick you out. To go further, if you commit a crime while in that country, after you serve your time, if you're lucky to get out, then they kick you out. That's in every country in the world. During the President Obama administration, there was a MOA put in place for the 287G program. And that was that the Tier 1 offenders, the program would specifically address people convicted of or arrested for killing another person, raping another person, robbing another person, kidnapping another person, or a major drug offense. It's a 287G program. To take it one step further, earlier this year when this body passed HB 16, on the day of sine die, according to the newspapers, an individual in my community named Santos Margarito Tercios Benitez was arrested for killing someone 3 miles from my house, where my children play, stabbing a victim multiple times, a mother of two, and leaving her naked body in a stream. Turns out, he was here illegally. And part of the 287G program, which would, if found guilty, hold him accountable. If he ever gets out, he would then be turned over to the authorities. If you want to truly honor the sacrifices and contributions of our immigrant community, how about holding those who commit heinous crimes in our state accountable? After all, most immigrants come to the United States to flee countries where crime is rampant and government is corrupt. In conclusion, as a proud grandson of an immigrant, I appreciate the sacrifices and contributions that those in our immigrant community have made to our great country and our great state. And as a legislator, I have a responsibility to ensure that we are holding violent criminals accountable so that that American dream in which so many immigrants, like my grandfather, have risked life and limb for, that dream is still here. And I ask you to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Yes. Recognizing the gentleman from Ocean City, Wycomico County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the governor's veto. And I want to remind you, during a session when we were debating this bill, I offered an amendment which would have excluded Worcester County. This is a big deal to Worcester County, and I hope you reconsider and stand with me in supporting this. We're not talking about people who are just picked up nonchalantly because of their immigration status. We're talking about real criminals, rapists, murderers, some cases mass murderers. People are possibly wanted in their own country for mass murders, for heinous crimes.
I remember in the debate, the floor leader, he even recognized that Worcester County's detention center had a great reputation. And these people committing these crimes, they deserve to be detained. So if we're going to detain them, why not put them in a place where they're in Maryland, we have control over their outcome, and they're in a place that's reputable. We talked about family separation. But even if it was a U.S. citizen committing these crimes, they deserve to be separated from their family, from the society. I think that's what we would all agree what we would want. We talked about gang members. We all heard of the MS-13, but talking to the warden, there were some I never heard of. MS-18, Latin Kings, 18th Street, Mexican Mafia, Latin Kings. I know we don't like to talk about this being a monetary thing, but this is almost $8 million to the 3 counties that are impacted. And almost $5 million of that is for Worcester County alone. This represents 42% of the Worcester County Detention Center's budget. That 42% represents 26 jobs. And 26 jobs in Worcester County, where it's mostly tourism and agriculture, it's hard to find a full-time job. Pays well, pays benefits. We talk about well-paying jobs. And the reality of this bill, if we can't sustain the governor's veto with this, the families that are going to be impacted, there are 26 families in Worcester County of those folks who are going to be out of a job. And those jobs are going to be moved across the state line. They're going to be lost to York, Pennsylvania, and to Caroline County, Virginia. That's the reality of it. Fine, they won't be held here in Maryland, but they're going to be held in our neighboring states, impacting 26 families in my community, and I ask you to sustain the governor's veto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you, Speaker. And I rise in support of the governor's veto. We have many immigration needs in our district. This bill is not one of them. And I didn't get involved in the debate last session. It was a long debate. And the reason I'm standing today is because it was made very clear to our Dorchester County delegation that this particular piece of legislation is going to have a direct negative impact on that county. We were sort of taken by surprise. This is a nuance that not everybody is tracking very closely. And I want to make sure to be on the record to be clear that I'm going to be supporting this veto. And after learning from the Dorchester County Council about the impact, the negative impact this would have, I contacted, we have 4 counties in our district. So I contacted all the counties. I talked to the county council guys at parades and county meetings and stuff like that, and we sent emails. And I could tell everybody here, this isn't something I really engage a whole lot of dialogue with, because we've got a lot of immediate problems and a lot of immediate needs. But you know, the political people that are running the counties, they don't like it. You know, they don't want to have the state interfering with their ability to do different things, and that makes sense, right? But I think what would just blow everybody away, if you've taken the time to talk to the people, the professionals who are actually in charge of providing a safe, sound environment to incarcerate individuals, if you take the time to talk to them and hear about how short-sighted this idea is of creating this prohibition, I think you all would take a second chance, or a second thought about voting to override the governor's veto. It really doesn't make sense to anybody who's running any of these facilities, who's trying to provide a safe, sound environment. This does not make sense at all, okay? And we're going to force this and say, no, we're just off the table. You're not qualified to do this. Think about the message you're sending to an entire part of our state right now that's reeling, and that's called public safety. It's a big deal. This is a big bill. And I had no idea that it was going to hurt so badly one of our counties, and it is. And so I guess my question to everybody here is, so this bill goes into effect, what do we say to Dorchester County? I think 80% of the roads in Dorchester County are county-maintained roads. It's one of the biggest counties in the state of Maryland. Who's going to pay them back? Who's going to fill in? They're short officers in every police force. I don't want to get into the whole public safety debate, but it's all related. The synergy is there. It's real. And the pain there right now for the people that are trying to provide public safety is very real. It's on the streets. It's in the people who are actually doing it. It's emotional. I get the emotion. I heard all the arguments. I didn't get involved in the debate last year because both sides were going, you know, they've got these arguments and it really moves you. But think about the reality of what you're doing to these professionals. And then asking them, why can't you do more? Why can't you do better? And then look in the mirror and you can, I mean, the problems are there. You hear it all the time. We would do better, Johnny, but the state doesn't let us. We would do this, Johnny, but the state won't let us. When is the state going to listen? When is the state going to pay attention? You know, there are always problems, and we're going to have a problem, so we're going to fix the problem. You're not fixing a problem. You're making a problem. This matters. This matters. At some point, you can only go so far, right? At some point, the bow breaks. There are certain places right now where people are looking in the mirror and they're saying to their elected officials, what for? What for? Over and over again. Well, I tell you, over and over again, there is a break point, right? We're not going to operate this facility anymore because we don't have the funding. Well, what's the answer going to be? What do we tell people in Dorchester County when they tell us we're not doing this anymore? Remember, do not comply. You heard all that. Well, that's, you know, we hear this is a government. These governments are fed up. They're not getting their transportation funding. They're getting smothered in mandates. And now this. I understand the emotions about all the problems. We have immigration needs. I get that. But this isn't the answer. So I'm voting no to override the governor's veto, and I'd recommend everybody else in the chamber do the same. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam
I don't know which one got up.
You want to go? Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Gentleman from Carroll.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And on a purely personal note, I want to thank everybody for the expressions of support and concern after my car wreck yesterday. Thank you very much. I do want you to know that they took me over to the hospital and they diagnostically confirmed that which you all have long suspected. They did a brain scan, they didn't find anything. So, thank you. Thank you all very much. So, now for my tirade. Just a couple points in addition to those that have been raised by my colleagues. I mean, let's just call this legislation what it is. I mean, this is sanctuary state legislation, plain and simple. This bill hinders cooperation with federal law enforcement. It's not within our purview. I don't think it's within the Baltimore City State's Attorney's purview either to pick and choose which laws we're going to comply with. If you don't like federal immigration law, get the Democratic members of Congress and the Democratic administration and the White House to change the laws. But in addition to making us essentially a sanctuary state, this bill has other unintended consequences that I wanted to point out. It really promotes the notion of private prisons and private institutions, and we don't have any of those in this state presently. It takes an important tool from law enforcement by limiting what they can ask during routine encounters. And it impedes the efforts of law enforcement investigations by denying them access to federal agency records. So in short, Madam Speaker, what this bill does is it makes us less safe and puts the interest of illegals over our law-abiding folks. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the governor's veto of this. To me, I got to put this bill into the big picture of everything. You know, conservatives and Democrats, moderate Democrats, they used to be like-minded in illegal immigration because we knew it was bad for the American worker. Makes little sense to, you know, try to help somebody off the bottom of the economic ladder and then undercut them with cheap foreign and illegal labor. But something happened. There was a huge shift policy-wise, and it happened really after the 2010 election. If you remember that election, there was a red wave that year, and it seemed like there was almost a policy coming out of Washington, out of the majority party policy here, that said, you know what, we're going to replace those rural area voters with a long-term demographic shift in this country. So we came up with a bunch of friendly immigration policies in the state because they couldn't pass it in Congress. And the first one I remember is in-state tuition for illegal aliens. You know, we drove that to a voter referendum. Voters passed it. Republicans were like, begrudgingly, maybe it's not that bad. But the activists didn't stop there. The following year, they passed driver's licenses for illegal aliens. And then the year after that, we opened up Pell Grants. And then the year after that, we gave them delegate and Senate scholarships. And then we've had numerous bills to get rid of the 287G program. But last year, I think, was most egregious. You know, in a 2-week sequence, we came here, we overrode the governor's veto on a digital download tax, taxing Netflix, taxing Amazon Prime, Spotify, anything you do on the internet. Took $123 million estimated out of our citizens' pockets. And then the following week, the General Assembly passed a $65 million tax credit that only non-citizens qualified for. We have a border crisis on our southern border, and Maryland's waving money out the window saying, come here. And look, border crisis, that's 100% caused by this president. He inherited a secure border. Now it's not. Hundreds of thousands of people are flooding across the border monthly. And you look at here in Maryland, even if we had a president that was willing to take on the challenge to fix it, Maryland's like, nope, we're going to provide safe harbor. It's not right. We've had crime problems. We have overdose problems caused by fentanyl. And this is one other problem that needs to be straightened out. I rise to support the governor's veto. He's right on this issue. And the General Assembly is going to override it. We're wrong. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Montgomery, floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I feel the presentation and depiction of this bill you just heard is fairly misleading. I want to read to you a newspaper editorial that I think did a pretty straightforward and clear description of what House Bill 16 would do. Certain law enforcement agencies have chosen to enter into partnership with ICE to racially profile and harass people of color, tossing them in for-profit jail cells, and then arranging their deportation. This bill would ban the practice. That's a very simple and clear description of what House Bill 16 does. But let me point out a very critical fact here. Unlike what the minority party is trying to do, to invoke immigrants and criminals in the same sentence as many times as they can, naming as many gangs as they can. This bill is predominantly about how we are going to treat our non-criminal immigrant residents and neighbors in Maryland. Non-criminal. And I have to say this over and over again. The vast, vast majority of people detained in these for-profit ICE facilities are our neighbors, our residents, our constituents, and they are non-criminals. There was a recent Syracuse study that nationwide looked at this population. 98% of the people detained in these ICE facilities are non-criminals. Half of them don't even have a traffic offense on their record. So this constant invoking of violent criminals and rapists, it is a distortion and it is a lie, and it is intended to get you to support a policy of allowing our counties to balance budgets off of for-profit family separation. This bill would end that practice, and simply put, that's what it's about. Now let me take you away from the national studies and to tell you what's happening here in Maryland. There are 3 counties that run these for-profit facilities: Frederick, Howard, and Worcester. Howard has been engaging in raging debates about this practice, and so what did they do? Over time, they said, all right, you want us to focus on violent immigrant criminals? That's what we're going to do. You know what happened when Howard restricted their population? It went from 100 to 8. I'll say this again. Who were those 92 other people that were being jailed in Howard County? They were not the violent criminals that are being depicted today on the floor. So we've got to stop this xenophobia. We're going to make Maryland a sanctuary from this sort of foolishness and xenophobia. So please, please, please stand by your vote on House Bill 16 and end this madness. Maryland is not going to allow its counties to profit off of to have for-profit family separation to balance budgets. Let's end this today. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Baltimore, Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to make sure the body understands this bill has 2 parts to it, and so that's why there's maybe some confusion with what my colleague and my new vice chair just mentioned. The for-profit is not that we are arresting people for a profit. It is very different. What is happening is there's a contract between the counties that have decided to enter into it and the people that ICE have already asked to be detained. Those people will still be detained. They will simply not be detained in the state of Maryland any longer. That is the one part. The other part is an inability for our jails to then go ask people when they have committed a crime, likely, whether or not they are here illegally or not. That is the question that's asked under the 287G program. It is done in very few places. One of my counties is one of the places it's done, and it has removed a lot of violent criminals from our community. In fact, Hartford County is a wonderful place to live. Many of my Democrat friends are moving here. So, I may be sitting near one, actually. Anyways, the point is there are 2 different parts, and so I don't want to conflate what actual for-profit prisons are for what this bill is actually about, which is not for-profit prisons. This is a contract between people that were already given ICE detainers and a county, period. They are paying the county to use their jail space. Those same people will be detained elsewhere. While I'm on the study or the topic of immigration and illegal immigration, I'm not sure how many people in here are heavily involved in the immigrant community. I expect there's a bunch. And it may shock you, but I happen to be one of them because I'm married to an immigrant, and I'm going to keep talking about this. Not all immigrants feel the same way as what's often portrayed in here. As my colleague from Frederick said, who is the grandson of an immigrant, some immigrants feel differently. In fact, some of them feel like the policies passing in this legislature aren't helpful to their communities because they're being predated by bad actors in their own communities. When my husband first immigrated here, he was held up at gunpoint in Anne Arundel County. The team that hit the shop where he was at killed people in the next robbery. The policies we have here don't feel safe to some people. So I really wish we would get off this high moral ground of trying to shame one side and act like we don't care about communities of color and people who are immigrants. We absolutely do, but we're hearing from different ones than the ones you're clearly hearing from. And our immigrants want safety in their communities, and they don't want murderers and rapists to be hanging around and released into the public. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to tell this body about a young man named Yuga Naidu from Durban, South Africa, who helped organize and work really hard to fight the apartheid regime. He was eventually killed. His wife and children fled, and his niece is standing here speaking to you. Immigrants' lives absolutely matter, and let me tell you, this bill, the one thing I can tell you it's saying is in that the great state of Maryland, we do not make money off of black and brown bodies. In the state of Maryland, we do not make money off of the incarceration of black and brown bodies. And I am proud that this body has said that, and I know that this body is going to say that again by overriding this veto. Let me be really clear. A violation of an immigration law is a civil violation. It is not a criminal violation. Overstaying your visa is a civil violation. It is not a criminal violation. And as someone, like many of my colleagues who are in Maryland courtrooms every single day, I trust our prosecutors and our court system that are going to hold, yes, I said that, Mr. Chair. I trust our prosecutors and our criminal system that's going to hold criminals accountable, and they do. And they're serving time and they are in prison. When you violate a law here in the state of Maryland, when you are a violent offender, you will be charged and we will find you. But when you violate a civil violation, you should not be not only incarcerated, but then have your civil rights violated in these private prisons. That is not the state that we are in. That is not the community, that's not the kind of policy our communities are asking for, and that's what this bill says. And let me be really clear with you, when ICE actually has the violent criminals that they are looking for, they are showing up at our county prisons and jails and picking people up even before trials have even started for their deportation proceedings. So you need to be really clear and stop conveying that immigrant equals criminal and criminal equals immigrant. Because it does not. And as a daughter of immigrants and a first-generation American, I'm proud to support this legislation. I'm proud of my colleagues that worked hard on this legislation, and I encourage everyone in this body to vote green and override this veto, because in Maryland, we don't make money and run our budgets off of incarcerating black and brown bodies for our benefit. Thank you.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel, that's in the back.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am an immigrant. I just been here for about 30 years. Matter of fact, yesterday was my 31-year anniversary. So I appreciate living here. Thank you. And as an immigrant, I have never been discriminated against. I don't think. I think this particular bill will put our citizens at risk, and I believe it protects criminals and it doesn't help our citizens. I do want to read some of the national statistics, because our colleague from Montgomery County failed to mention that in 2020, 37 aliens were convicted of homicide, 920 aliens were convicted of assault, 1261 were convicted of dangerous drugs, 104 were convicted of sex offenses and assaults, 377 convicted of obstructing police, and 190 convicted of weapon offense. Those are big numbers. And I believe if you pass this bill, you have blood on your hands, because if someone gets out of jail and goes out and commits a crime, it is our responsibility, our fault, and we all have blood on our hand. And for that reason, as a proud immigrant, I support sustaining the governor's veto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to make a couple things very, very clear, first of all. To imply that anybody in this body, because we support this veto, is xenophobic is dishonest, Madam Speaker, and it's also extremely insulting. And two, it was also said that in Maryland that we incarcerate folks because they are black or brown in skin color. We've never done that. We've never done that. I don't think there's a single person in this room. Hold on. These folks, Madam Speaker, let me finish. And that's insulting too. I have the floor right now, and for folks to respond in such a manner is also
Gentlemen, go ahead and
unprofessional.
proceed with your comments.
But there's a judicial process in place right now in our entire country, and Maryland is no different. People who are incarcerated they're being tried in court, and they're being incarcerated because they committed a crime, and there's a victim in Maryland somewhere. They victimized another Marylander, and that's the reason why they're in prison. So to say that anybody in this room supports detaining anyone because of the color of their skin is insulting, Madam Speaker. It is. It's absolutely insulting. I'm insulted because that's not what I think. That's not what I believe. And I will support the governor's veto in this. And the floor leader, our friend from Montgomery County, cited the reason why we're passing this bill was because of a study from Syracuse University. I've very briefly read through that study, and I don't know that Syracuse University even looked at any of the detention centers here in Maryland. And there was a big difference in a lot of these detention centers. The lowest percentage of Class 1 offenses was in Georgia, 14%. And the highest was almost 60%. So there's a big variation across the country. So we're going to pass a bill where we're relying on a study from Syracuse University that, as far as we know, didn't even include any of the detention centers in Maryland. It just doesn't make any sense. And folks, if somebody commits a crime in Maryland, they're still going to be arrested. That's the bottom line. They're still going to be arrested. And whether we detain them in Maryland or in Pennsylvania or in Virginia, they're still going to be detained somewhere. We just have to transport them to that other. So it doesn't make any sense for us to not detain them in our state, as it was said by my colleague from Ocean City, where we actually have control over the entire incarceration process. Why would we send them to Virginia? Why would we send them to Pennsylvania? And why are we basing this bill on a study that didn't include our detention centers here in Maryland? It just doesn't make any sense. So I do support this veto. Thank you.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you. Very quickly, Madam Speaker. To me, regardless of how heinous or minor the infraction, these people are innocent until proven guilty. And I want them here in Maryland, in a facility in Maryland, where we can tour that facility. We can look at those facilities. I don't want to leave it up to Pennsylvania or West Virginia or wherever else we're going to send these folks. They're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law regardless, and I want any facility that they're detained in subject to our high standards. That's why I'll be voting to uphold the governor's veto. Thank you.
The gentleman from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the governor's veto on this bill, and I wanted to mention an anecdote that recently noted a suspected criminal of trafficking of children was out on bail and released, and because there was no ICE detainer, that person was able to walk free until the trial, which obviously he may never show up for. And I make that comment because the comments to say that we're somehow in Frederick profiting off of individuals, and that's a falsity. It needs to be corrected in the record. The real issue here is that there is a massive influx of trafficking of persons across our border, and this bill was vetoed to stop that and protect lives, and that's why I support the sustaining. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Montgomery, the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take the temperature down one or two notches, because I don't think that any of my colleagues on either side of the aisle, whether you oppose the governor's veto or whether you support the governor's veto, are somehow bigoted or racist. But I do think from what we've heard today and what we heard last session, we have a lot of folks who are unfortunately really, really confused about what the bill does. And so before we take a final vote, I just want to go through a little bit of a fact check so that everybody, most of you have probably decided how you're going to vote one way or another, but just for the record, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page with what the bill does do and what the bill does not do. So first of all, if you are convicted of a crime in Maryland, or not, sorry, if you are charged with a crime, a violent crime, let's say you are charged with rape or you are charged with murder, you go through the criminal process whether or not you are an undocumented immigrant, a documented immigrant, or not an immigrant at all. And then you serve your time, and then if you have committed a violent offense, you're going to be deported from this country, and nothing in this bill changes that process whatsoever. In fact, as my colleague from Montgomery County stated, the vast majority, and by the way, the Syracuse study absolutely included Maryland, and if you just Google Syracuse ICE Detention Center, Maryland, it immediately comes up. And I would invite you all to look at that. The latest snapshot of Maryland facilities showed about 250 detainees across 3 centers. Guess how many had ever been convicted of murder in their entire life? 2. 2 out of 250 detainees in the state of Maryland as of the summer of 2019, which is the last time they did the snapshot. But to hear this debate, you would be thinking that it would be 250 of 250. Unfortunately, immigrants in this country, there's a long history, and I myself come from a long line of hillbillies and rednecks who initially immigrated from Scotland. And like many other immigrants from Scotland were called criminals. They were called cannibals. They were called drunks and morons. I'm sure a lot of folks in this room come from immigrants who were called criminals at one time when they first came to this country. Unfortunately, in America, we have a history of conflating criminals with immigrants. But fortunately, the bill that you have today says something really, really simple. It says that every Marylander should be treated with dignity. It says that no one should profit from someone being picked up for a stupid reason like eating a sandwich, which did happen in Frederick County. They were sent to a facility for eating a sandwich outside. Or what happened to one of my constituents, they helped their uncle cut down a tree, and they lacked a tree cutting license, and so they spent 90 days in one of these facilities being denied proper medical care. What a green vote on this bill says is simple. That's wrong. We're not going to allow it anymore in Maryland. Now, does that mean that all these folks are going to go to Pennsylvania or Virginia? You've heard that. I guess it must be true because about 8 people have said it. No, that's also absolutely false. Because we have an amazing technology in this country that folks invented a few decades ago. Ankle bracelets. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of this. It's amazing. You clasp them onto your ankle, and then you can monitor where people are. And so what happens when you don't have a profit incentive and you don't have the convenience of 3 facilities in a state is that when someone is picked up for a traffic stop and they don't have documentation, while they wait for their hearing, they can just go home with an ankle bracelet. They do not have to be detained at all. And why is that? Because they're not violent. There is no reason to detain people who have been in this country many times for years and years, who have no violent offense, who oftentimes have no even traffic offense. There is absolutely no reason to detain them, and the only folks who want to do that is because they're out to make a profit. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, by casting a green vote and by overriding the governor's veto on this, Maryland will send an extremely strong message that we are better than ICE, we are better than its depravity, we are better than for-profit family separation, and we stand with a dignity for every single Marylander in this state.
Is there any further debate? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, to explain my vote.
Gentleman, Minority Leader.
I just wanted to thank my colleague from Montgomery County. I disagree with quite a lot of what he just said about the practical implications of the bill, but I appreciate what he said, and I hope we all take it to heart today, tomorrow, next week, next year. We have to start finding each other where we are and where we live and treating each other with dignity and with respect. I appreciate you saying that. I don't think there is a single member of my caucus, I'd almost put my hand on the Bible and swear to that, who is a xenophobe or a racist who wants to hurt innocent people, innocent immigrants in any way, shape, or form. And I do not believe that any of you on the other side of the aisle want to coddle murderers and rapists, regardless of where they came from or what language they speak. I hope that is the case. And so we have differences of opinion about this issue and how it will work out in the real world, and we'll see how that goes. But I appreciate the remarks and how we can start treating each other better on that issue. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
The
To explain my vote.
gentlelady from Baltimore City to explain her vote.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I just rise to explain my vote to override the governor's veto. This legislation is about public safety and it's about valuing our constituents, even those who don't have yet fully legal status. I, with my colleagues, am really honored to represent a district with a large number of immigrants who have made our communities thrive and grow, who attend school with my son, who populate our Main Street districts, and are helping our communities each and every day. This bill ensures that those immigrants understand that they don't need to live in fear when they choose to live in Maryland, that if a crime is committed against them, that they should have trust that law enforcement can report those crimes to law enforcement. This bill simply prohibits police from coercing, intimidating, or threatening individuals. That builds trust with police and government. This bill prohibits state or local governments from entering into these contracts with ICE. That, again, builds trust with police and government. Ultimately, I vote green because this bill demonstrates our responsibility to build trust between the community, law enforcement, and government. And that leads to safer communities and a stronger state. I'm proud to vote green. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Montgomery.
Thank you. To explain my vote, colleagues, I heard a lot of folks talk about immigrants and being, related to, friends with, married to, walking buddies with. But as an immigrant, I don't need to say that this country has done a good job of otherizing immigrants. And what this bill, the way I see it, is harm reduction. Harm reduction in the sense that we know the conditions of ICE detention facilities. We know what happens when we choose to put profit over people and to instead profit off of those very same people. And we know what happens to communities when ICE separates families. And so this bill to me is about harm reduction, and it is about slowly chipping away at this otherizing of immigrants that too often have taken place and have led to this kind of a mindset. The Dignity Not Detention is a good bill. Proud to override this governor's in my opinion, short-sighted veto of this legislation. And my hope is that we can do more to make this state more welcoming and safe for not just all of us, but particularly immigrants. Thank you.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam
Explain
Speaker.
his vote.
Thank you. Several years ago, Judiciary passed a bill that put in place a committee to review the fatalities of youths who are involved in the juvenile justice system. While I can't speak I can't speak about most of what I've seen in serving in that capacity on that committee. One of the most troubling things that I've seen a trend over the past several years are cases of youths who've been threatened to either join a local gang or were subsequently killed. And this includes many young people who were either legal or here illegally themselves. So my fear is that at many of our institutions today, what we're actually doing is we're cutting off our capacity in government to even ask the question any longer. And that's what this bill does, and I think that's why many people here have a concern today. This bill prevents law enforcement from even inquiring about a person's status or detaining a person temporarily to investigate that. I think, it puts law enforcement, it paints them as antagonizers. I think we have a real problem with illegal immigration. I've gone on the record, and I'll do so again today. I think immigration is a huge part of our country. I think we want immigration, and we need immigration. But to turn our back on activities that are clearly illegal and clearly growing is the wrong thing to do for our state. And I think, unfortunately, this bill just helps us sweep the problem under the rug, and that's why I'll be voting with the governor today.
Anyone wants to explain their vote?
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to explain my vote because not only did I listen to my community, but in 2018, I listened to my chief of police, and we could not have been more ideologically posed, but we were on the same page on this issue. He said that when we muddy law enforcement, when we conflate federal and local law enforcement, it makes it harder for him to do his job. It makes it harder for his folks to do their job. It makes community policing more challenging because he can't get trust in the community. So I rise to support the override of the governor's veto because this bill will help community policing and it supports our local law enforcement in local law enforcement. Thank you.
Anyone else to explain their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will take the call. There being 90 votes in the affirmative, the bill has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 16. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Hearing no objection, the message is adopted. Special order calendar veto House Bill number 23. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 23, Personal Information, State and Local Agencies, Restrictions on Access, Maryland Driver Privacy.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill is very similar to the issue that we just discussed, so I'll be brief. But I do feel that this measure is really something that will continue to make our citizens less safe. And we continue to persist in passing what I believe are irresponsible laws protecting people who have come here illegally. We should have law enforcement and law enforcement agents have access to critical databases in order to come to conclusions about people who are in our communities, every person in our communities. I just feel that this is what we should be doing. I know we've kind of discussed this issue at length, so I will keep that to my comments. But I do urge you, for the reasons already stated several times, that we sustain the governor's veto on this important legislation. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'll also try to be quick because, again, it is very similar. But I do want to rise in support of the governor's veto for a couple of reasons. And number one dates back to just 2 years ago in my district, well, in the border of my district, but very close to where I grew up. There was a MS-13 murder that took place right in Loch Raven Village, which is about 2 or 3 minutes from where I went to high school, 2 or 3 minutes from where I went to college. Now, the reason I bring this story up is because it was our Baltimore County executive, John Olszewski, who in the article from Fox 45 was quoted as saying that the newly announced federal, quote, strike force composed of detectives, prosecutors, and federal agents from across the region will help target and disrupt drug gangs within the Baltimore region. What he was referring to was MS-13, in which committed the murders. Loch Raven Village, again, right in the district, there's another article I was able to find just within 2 minutes ago that was titled Maryland Crackdown on MS-13 Gang Activity, where the U.S. Attorney interviewed in the article says that MS-13 gang members since 2017 have made up more federal prosecutions in our office than the entire country. The article goes on. The U.S. Attorney of Maryland, Jonathan Lesner, said, quote, "That's why now, more than ever, investigators are relying on partnerships with other departments at the local and federal level to share information about potential activity." So the reason I make these points is because our federal partnership with our state and local governments play a massive role in helping fight. Again, the point's been made, and I agree, not to go after people who have committed no crime other than, of course, they are in the country illegally, but to go after potential violent criminals. Why would we make it more difficult to cooperate with our federal partners to go after potential violent MS-13 gang members? I see absolutely no reason why we would do something like that. To make it more difficult for them to do it is, I believe, can be a tragic mistake, and that's why I will oppose this veto and support the governor, or oppose this bill and support the governor. Thank you.
Any further debate? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 93 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate, the clerk will read the message.
ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 23. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Special order calendar vetoed House Bill 114. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 114, Transportation Maryland Transit Administration Funding and MARC Rail Extension Study, Transit Safety and Investment Act.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question's been answered.
Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For hopefully my last time today, I would like to rise to discuss the realities of this bill. I'm really happy we took this bill next. It's kind of boring. It's about transportation funding and mass transit. Nobody should really get too worked up about it. It's not boring to my good friend from Baltimore City, but come on, guys, it's kind of boring. But it's important. And, you know, I've had several conversations with the Department of Transportation as to why they wanted this bill vetoed. They didn't want the bill vetoed because they don't like mass transit. My goodness, they're in the business of mass transit. Probably half the people who work there, they only have a job if we continue to have mass transit and investments in mass transit. The reason why they advocated to have the bill vetoed really boils down to a couple of things. Number one, they believe, and I think that that's correct, that by mandating a certain level of funding for certain types of programs or certain types of sub-programs within the Department of Transportation's envelope of services they provide, you take away their flexibility to adjust budgetary items to meet pressing needs, to deal with the realities of construction. Construction is not just roads, construction is mass transit projects as well. I do a decent amount of construction litigation, and I will tell you that there's almost nothing more unpredictable than major commercial construction. Everything you think will happen doesn't happen. Everything you think will cost X amount winds up costing more or taking more time. And so what I do want to make clear is that transit, according to the Department of Transportation, is approximately 41% of the total funding in their current 6-year CTP plan, the long-range plan that they do, and that they currently have $2.44 billion allocated towards the type of transit investments that this bill would mandate. And the bill would actually mandate, according to their analysis, $2.25 billion over the same period of time. So they're actually planning to do more. They just want the flexibility as professionals to decide how to do that. I will tell you, I asked them a couple questions, and I think, you know, I'm a big believer in this. We have to live in the world as it exists. I know all of us would like to make the world perfect or in our own perfect vision, and that's noble to try to do that step by step, incrementally, but we do have to live on a day-to-day basis in the world as it exists. And here's where the world exists in terms of Maryland mass transit. The fare box recovery rate. So where does this money come from? Largely, not exclusively, but largely it comes from gas taxes. And gas taxes were created, as we all understand, many, many years ago, because you were using the public's roads and they had to be built and they had to be maintained, and bridges and things of that nature. So you helped contribute to that through paying a tax on every gallon of gas. Gas prices are as high as what they've been in this country, maybe ever, pretty close. I can't imagine there's not a person in this room, even from the wealthiest districts, that don't go home and occasionally hear from a neighbor, a friend, a constituent, a coworker, man, I'm getting killed at the gas pump. Man, inflation is killing me. I'm getting killed. We charge a gas tax on every gallon of gas that comes out, and the purpose for that was to provide for certain projects. So the gas tax, by and large, not completely, not exactly, I'm not suggesting that every year the numbers come out perfectly, but by and large, the gas tax helps to pay for these road and transit projects to an extent. What is the fare box recovery rate for mass transit in the state of Maryland? According to the MTA, they gave me these statistics this morning, as of November, Bus services in the state of Maryland, anybody got a good guess? 13%. 13% of the costs comes back from the people who use it and pay for it. Light rail, 13%. Subway, what they call heavy rail, which only exists in a couple small areas, frankly, not small areas, but a couple of isolated areas of the state. It's not something that runs throughout all of the areas of the state. They estimated at 13%. Commuter rail, people that want to pay to use the commuter rail, how much does it pay for their costs? Their estimate is 30%. The estimate is the world has changed. We all sit here and talk about the world has changed, COVID-19, we've all changed. One of the things that's changed is people don't use these services the same way. All MTA services across all of their mass transit platforms, their estimate is they're down 43% since 2019. I don't know when that's going to change, if it's going to change. I thought when we left here in April, we wouldn't be sitting here looking at each other with masks on. I'm sure we all thought and hoped that. I thought we wouldn't be worried about variants. I thought we'd all be vaccinated. I thought, I'm sure all of us thought and hoped that would be, but we don't know. I don't know if the mass transit economy is ever going to come back based upon these things. But they'll suggest to you that truck traffic is actually up 19%, according to their analysis in the state of Maryland. And that street traffic, state highway traffic, is down. People are going less places. It's down 5%, not 43%. And so their perspective, I'm not a transportation engineer, I'm not a transportation expert, but you can read statistics and you can look at numbers and you can realize that the investments that we make in these mass transit modalities are not really being met by our constituents, by our friends, by our neighbors, by our businesses in terms of how they're being used and how they're being paid for. If they were, we wouldn't be having these debates. They would be working very well, the fare box recovery rates, people would be willing to pay a reasonable amount to use the services that would somehow match the costs of maintaining the services. And the Department of Transportation's position is pretty clear. They want flexibility. They don't want to be mandated a specific amount. They are paying billions of dollars. They are planning to continue to invest in these modalities for the betterment, predominantly the betterment of some of the larger areas and suburban areas of the state that have these modalities in much higher usage rates. They're willing to do that, but they don't want to be told how. And I think we have to take a recognition of the fact that how much longer can you continue to invest in something if it's really not panning out in the real world? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to ask you to sustain the governor's veto as well for a number of reasons. And I won't repeat what was just said before me. But keep in mind, the Transportation Trust Fund was determined to be a special fund about 50 years ago. And it's done us all very well. Those of you who haven't been around for a while, or come in the last few years, you haven't really gotten to participate in the process. But every year, the Maryland State Highway Administration comes around and they do the tour, the road tour to every one of your counties. And they come and ask your county's priorities, and we all participate. Legislators participate, your county councils, your county commissioners, and the public. Every single county gets this tour, and they ask you what your priorities are, and you're supposed to agree on what your priorities are. And they try to weave that all into their plan, and it's not very simple. They have small projects, they have massive long-term projects, they have transit projects, and we all have different priorities. I can tell you that my priorities are very different maybe than in Baltimore City. We don't have transit in Carroll County, yet we crawl to work some days because of congestion, so we have different priorities. The problem with this bill that I see, even though the dollar value is not huge on it compared to the value of the fund, but this bill sets a precedent for mandating certain spending levels within the Transportation Trust Fund. And once we do it once for this little thing, what's next? Whose priority they want to put a piece of legislation in to override the current process that we had for many, many years. And my colleague talked about flexibility. I mean, this last couple of years has been a whirlwind of ups and downs for the Transportation Trust Fund and the revenues coming in. I mean, a year ago, the bottom fell out. Gas prices were low, which means our taxes that are coming in are low since we have sales tax on gas prices. So when gas prices are low, we bring in less money to the Transportation Trust Fund. People were traveling less, so they weren't using gas. So we were facing a whole new reality, the State Highway Administration, of how they're going to react in their budget. This year, the opposite has happened. We have traffic all over the place, and we've got gas prices sky high, and our sales taxes on gas has brought in more revenue. So it's always we're always having to have flexibility within the Transportation Trust Fund. This year is going to be especially different because of all the federal money that's coming in. And there's a lot of requirements that go with the federal money as to where you are in a certain process with a certain project. So this federal funding is going to be available for certain specific kinds of priorities, the way that it gets matched. So the State Highway Administration needs the flexibility, and we keep talking about flexibility, to be able to program our capital budget to make the best use of the federal money coming in. So I just ask you to continue to honor the Transportation Trust Fund as it was put in place 50 years ago and has done very well for us. And once we start the precedent of a person, and I understand that it's important transit to certain constituencies, but once we start determining what their priorities are through this legislative body versus doing it through the process that we've always used, we're just opening us up to next year. We'll be here for someone else's bill for another $1 million here, another $1 million there. I might put one in myself, but this precedent to get my project done, my #1 project in Carroll County, Route 32, which has not been addressed in the last 18 years. But anyway, I digress, and I don't think that's the way that we should be working with the Transportation Trust Fund. So I urge you all to consider the precedent that we're setting here. We're on a good trajectory. Go to your capital improvement meetings with your State Highway Administration, your CTP tours, and weigh in that way, and you'll find that they're very, very responsive, and they do a very good job with the money that they're allocated. So please consider those items and sustain the governor's veto that he wisely put on this bill. Thank you.
Gentleman from Montgomery, floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the Minority Leader and the colleague from Carroll County for their points. I do have to correct the record on a few things. First of all, the Minority Leader started out by calling this bill boring, and I just cannot tolerate that kind of personal attack on the floor. I can't believe the chair of HGO was not up on that, defending my honor. But second, and more seriously, you would think that this is the first time we've ever, quote unquote, mandated spending from the Transportation Trust Fund, but that must be news to so many of my friends on the Republican side of the aisle who call me and text me and email me asking me to support highway user revenue and asking the Subcommittee on Appropriations and Transportation and the Environment to support highway user revenue, which is a mandated set of spending through the Transportation Trust Fund, and one I think most people in this room probably support. That mandate expires in a couple of years, and you may want to talk about how we extend it or improve it. I see my friend over on the Eastern Shore giving me the thumbs up. So when we talk about mandated spending, let's not act like this is some entirely new thing when it comes to the Transportation Trust Fund. And I can give you many other examples, from the ship, the Pride, that the chair worked so hard to fund, and a little thing I like called Metro Rail, which we worked with the governor on a bipartisan basis to fund through a mandate. I also need to correct the record on the source of funding for transportation projects in the state of Maryland, because it is just not true that gas taxes fund transportation projects entirely in the state of Maryland. Not roads, not bridges, not tunnels, not trains, not buses, not the airport, not the Port of Baltimore. About 25% of the Transportation Trust Fund is funded through Maryland state gas taxes. 25%. It's a big number if you look at the number in the aggregate, but as a percentage, it's just not that significant when you look at the whole. Now, look, this bill does three things, and I just want to be really clear on what it does so everyone understands what it is you're hopefully voting for, but perhaps a few of you are voting against. One, what we heard the most about, is it provides a little bit more funding for the Maryland Transit Administration, which runs our commuter MARC rail system that goes to many parts of the state, funds the local operating transit systems, the local bus systems through some grants, and then, of course, the local bus service in Baltimore City, the subway, the light rail. But what it does for that is fund state of good repair. It funds maintenance needs. About 4 years ago, this body asked for a report on what the maintenance backlog was and found a $2 billion maintenance gap for the Maryland Transit Administration. So this isn't about building new fancy trains or all the stuff I daydream about all day. It's about maintaining what we already have. The second thing it does is it funds business grants for businesses that are adversely affected by the Purple Line construction. Now, I support the Purple Line, but the construction is not going well. It has not been managed well by the state. The contractor walked away. They've spent about a year trying to get a new contractor. We have businesses along the Purple Line corridor that have lost their parking lots, have lost access to their front doors, have lost the street that goes in front of them. The Barking Dog in my district, for example, I know many in the district of the Parliamentarian, for example, who's worked very hard on this. This provides funding assistance to those businesses. And third and finally, I've heard a lot recently about our need to do more for Western Maryland. a lot about that recently. This bill has the rail study requested by many members of the Western Maryland delegation to look at running commuter rail service out to Hagerstown, something we want to help move along with this bill. So I hope folks will support overriding the governor's veto because of what this bill actually does and not some of the rhetoric we just heard. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further debate? If not, the clerk will
Speaker?
call. Oh, okay. Recognizing gentlelady from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also wanted to make sure that the body knows that this is anything but boring. And I'm very proud to have my name on this bill. For many years, many of you know, we have worked very hard to make sure that Maryland has a first-class transit system, two of them, in fact, WMATA and MTA, that can serve our residents. And this bill is really the culmination of years of work that this body has done to make sure that we're providing a service that our residents and our businesses and communities around the state desperately need. So I wanted to share a quick story. During last spring, a woman called me. I had never met her before, but she was a friend of a friend. And it turned out she's my constituent, and we hadn't had a chance to meet before. And she is also one of the owners of O'Bricky's. I'm sure many of you have been to O'Bricky's when you're at BWI Airport. It's a great restaurant, great crabs. And she was not calling me about BWI specifically, though. She called me and she said to me, "Why can't my workers get to work on time on MTA? What is it about MTA that buses don't show up?" She said yesterday, in fact, in an op-ed that she published in the Baltimore Sun, that one of her managers lives near North Avenue in Baltimore, 25 minutes by car from BWI. But because that manager relies on public transit, it takes, when everything is working well, 75 minutes to get to BWI. But it never happens that everything is working well, and so it generally takes her 2 hours to get to work or back from North Avenue in Baltimore City to BWI. That's incredible. That is time that she's missing work. She cannot help out at her business. She's missing hours. She's not able to get back to help her kids with their homework, to make dinner, and whatnot. That is time that is not well spent for her or for the business. And so we work to make sure that this bill is based on facts. And like my colleague from Montgomery County said, we worked with MDOT MTA to make sure we had accurate numbers on what MTA needed. So MDOT now claims that they need more flexibility. But you know what? They've proven over the last 7 years that they can't fulfill their basic mandate to Marylanders to provide reliable transit service. We've given them 7 years to fund transit so that people can get to work on time. And they haven't done it. And we know they haven't done it because in this report, in their own words, they tell us there is $1.5 billion of deferred maintenance. And you know what that means? That means that deferred maintenance, that our light rail system, all of ours, that we as state legislators are responsible for, is ranked consistently as the worst light rail service in the country. That does not make me proud. Our commuter rail service breaks down more than any other commuter rail service in the country. Our buses break down more than any other bus system in the country. You know why people don't take transit and our fare box recovery rate isn't higher? Because MDOT MTA is not providing a service that is worth paying for. They have to do better. That is what this bill is about. It is about saying that Marylanders, Maryland businesses and communities, they deserve transit that works, and their government is going to make sure they have it. Thank you.
Any further debate? If not, the clerk will take the call.
Madam Speaker?
Call the roll. Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 101 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 114 has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 114. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Senate Bill 199. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 199, Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration Funding, and MARC Rail Extension Study, Transit Safety and Investment Act.
Recognizing the Majority Leader.
I have no questions on this bill, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding objection of the Chief Executive? Is there any? Oh, sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm trying to rush things. So, message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 199. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 199 has been overridden. Message to the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 199. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Okay. Special order calendar.
Where is it? Oh, I'm sorry. It's House bill. I'm sorry. I got it.
Yes. House Bill 174. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 174, Public Utilities, Investor-Owned Utilities, Prevailing Wage.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm standing today in support of the governor's veto of House Bill 174. This bill is going to require paying prevailing wage for our utilities and small contractors. And in light of the financial stress of our citizens over the past 2 years, there are certain things that are must-haves, and basic utilities in your home are obviously one of them. Requiring the payment of prevailing wage is going to raise the cost of all of our utility bills. We talked earlier, my colleague mentioned our gas prices are through the roof, housing is more expensive, groceries are more expensive, even our Christmas trees are more expensive. And when families have been struggling over lost wages, lost jobs, struggling with unemployment and getting their proper unemployment, basically struggling to make ends meet, this will hurt everyone in the state of Maryland. And I just find it, certainly, I would not agree with this bill otherwise anyway. However, in light of what people have been dealing with over the past 2 years, the fact that we would enact this legislation now, to me, is unconscionable, and we should not do it. So for those reasons, I ask that you really strongly consider what message you are sending to our citizens throughout the state who are really trying to do their best to make ends meet, to raise the prices of their basic utilities. So thank you so much.
Recognizing the gentleman from Charles.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting to override the governor's veto. I'd like to point out that in testimony we heard that roughly half the folks said it's going to go up, and half the folks said it's going to, either maintain or go down as far as the cost. In addition, we're putting an additional $80 million in additional funds for public utilities for just this issue. It's for underground projects. And I'd also like to say that we're going to be ensuring that highly skilled workers are working on our public right-of-ways to avoid massive disruption in services and also saving lives. But I think the most poignant argument was presented by my aging and learned chairman when he said that this is a philosophical debate and that basically either you believe in prevailing wage or you don't. Because every time we put this up, there's always a no and a reason, but it's always the same people saying no. So while we have plenty of reasons for you to support this bill, I understand it's philosophical. If you don't support prevailing wage, then regardless of the time of year, the time, if it's pre-COVID, post-COVID, you're not going to support this bill. But as I pointed out, we provided money for the public utilities. And this is to make sure we have some highly trained individuals working in some of our most dangerous areas. So for all these reasons, I ask that you join me in supporting the override the governor's veto.
Madam.
Gentlelady from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And yes, it is a philosophical debate. And you know, we have this issue come up quite a bit, and I find it always curious that the union labor lobby constantly tries to tell us how enacting prevailing wage will not cost projects more money and will not raise costs. I understand what you're saying about highly trained, and by the way, I mean, that doesn't make any math sense. I understand the highly trained workforce. My dad was a union electrician, Local 24, proud of it his whole life. They have one of the best apprenticeship programs out there. Totally agree with you. But I also believe in our small business communities who also provide highly skilled workforce because they wouldn't be able to continue to win biz and win work and do work within our communities and be successful. This is going to impede that. It's going to make projects cost more money. And as far as the highly skilled workforce and good jobs, I'll just use BG&E as an example. It's a great company to work for. They pay their folks very well. These are good long-term jobs. I don't think they're struggling to find highly skilled workforce, and I believe they train their folks very well also. So, you know, it is a philosophical difference. I don't believe in unionizing every industry in every single corner of the state. I don't think it's the proper thing to do, and it always results in higher costs to small businesses and certainly on our utility bills because they're going to pass it on to us. So thank you.
Minority Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm not going to get into the philosophy or the zen of prevailing wage, but let me just say to you, first off, I'm hoping that we're not suggesting that current projects that are being done by our investor-owned utilities aren't being done safely, and that because of that we have to have this bill. Really what this is about is trying to pass a union-style mandate on private businesses that are currently not required to do so. So two things. I'm a contractor that performs work on prevailing wage work. The first reason why it raises prices is because it limits competition. Once competitors realize that the prevailing wage laws are in place, the heavy mandates, the failure to comply, and the cost when you fail to comply, they say, no, I'm just not going to participate on that job. I'll find another job to do. So when you have fewer competitors, that allows for those competitors that remain to charge more money for the work that they do. And the second reason why prevailing wage jobs cost more is because of the methodology for which we create the prevailing wage to begin with. The process is a survey that's done. It allows contractors to come in, out-of-state contractors to come in, bring their New York, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia labor rates into Maryland, and then allow those out-of-state contractors, because they raised the rates to do the work, to come into our state and take away Maryland jobs. Madam Speaker, I would support the governor's veto because on very basic level, those reasons alone would be the reason to not pass the bill and to support the governor's veto. But the real reason why I'm standing is because we're in the middle of an environment, energy costs are going up, this will get passed to ratepayers. And so we need to stand firm with the governor on this veto, if for no other reason than to not hurt the ratepayers who will bear the burden of this cost.
Is there any further debate? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, my
Parliamentarian.
button. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My button didn't work on the last vote. I'd like to be recorded in the green.
Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 174. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Senate Bill 95. Message from the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 95. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 95, Public Utilities, Investor-Owned Utilities, Prevailing Wage.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass, notwithstanding the objection of the Chief Executive? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 95. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Special order calendar, vetoed House Bill 419. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 419, Economic Development, Advance Clean Energy and Clean Energy Innovation Investments and Initiatives.
Recognizing Majority Leader.
My question's been answered, Madam Speaker.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding the objections of the Chief Executive? Is there any debate? Not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 419. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Okay. Senate Bill 460. Message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 460. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Is there any debate? Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 460, Economic Development, Advance Clean Energy and Clean Energy Innovation Investments and Initiatives.
Is there any debate? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 460. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Special order calendar, vetoed House Bill 777. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 777, Power Plant Research Program, review of application for Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity alterations.
Recognizing Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions have been answered on House Bill 777.
Question for the House is, shall the bill pass notwithstanding objections of the Chief Executive? Any debate? Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 777. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Senate Bills 417. Message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 417. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 417, Power Plant Research Program, review of application for Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity alterations.
Is there any debate? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 417. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Senate Bill 717, message from the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 717. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 717, State Personnel, Collective Bargaining, Exclusive Representative Access to New Employees.
Is there any debate? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, the veto is overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 717. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
All right. Senate Bill 746, message from the Senate. Clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 746. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 746, Education, Community Colleges, Collective Bargaining.
Question for the House. Got that. Is there any debate? Not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate. The clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 746. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Special order calendar vetoed House Bill 319. The clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 319, Local Tax Relief for Working Families Act of 2021.
Recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All my questions have been answered.
Okay. Is there any debate? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate, the clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of House Bill 319. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Senate Bill 133. Message from the Senate, the clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Delegates, the Senate today, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, voted to override the veto on Senate Bill 133. Said bill is sent to you for your consideration.
Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 133, Local Tax Relief for Working Families Act of 2021.
Is there any debate? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 97 votes in the affirmative, the veto has been overridden. Message to the Senate, the clerk will read the message.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the House of Delegates has voted to override the governor's veto of Senate Bill 133. Said bill is returned to the Senate herewith, having been enacted under Article 2, Section 17 of the Maryland Constitution.
Will the leadership please come forward? If everyone could please take their seats. Could everyone please take their seats? Okay. All righty. Recognizing in the majority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want you to know that we're coming back at 5:30 and that the chamber will be secure, so if you want to leave your items, you can. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Quorum call before adjournment.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? The clerk will take the call. There be 139 members present. The House is still in session. Recognizing the majority leader.
Members, if you could quiet down for a second, please. I move that the House stand adjourned until Tuesday, December 7th at 5:30 p.m., and I ask that we adjourn in memory of our former House and Senate colleague, one of the first generation of black legislators to represent Prince George's County, Senator Nat Exum.